All right, that was fun. Hopefully people come over. We'll see. We had 270 people on the previous live. Let's see if we get some of those to come over to the new one. Hey, glad you made it over here. Appreciate you being here, by the way. If you don't know, I went live on my primary channel, if you're people that are just seeing me over here. And then I'm trying to do half of my lives on my primary channel and then the other half on my backup to get more people to follow my backup account. So I hope you're coming over because that's a good thing. It's working. Excuse me while I have a bite of, but I haven't eaten anything yet today. So a lot of times I'll go 18 hours without eating food, like intermittent fasting, because it just tends to make me not gain weight. So anyway, hey Tony, thank you Tony, appreciate the compliment. Yeah, like I said, those people I follow on Twitter, they're great, and hope you check them out. All right, grab some more water. Give me 1 sec. So excuse the noise. I'm going to put my coffee, which was unfinished from yesterday, in my microwave. So it makes a little noise. I apologize, but gotta hit the coffee. You know the deal. I mean, my mornings suck. By the way, for those of you who've don't know anybody who's going through Gulf War stuff, my mornings are so bad. So it takes me about 4 hours just to even have a chance of getting going, which makes life tough. Speaking of which, just so you know, the VA, which is the Veterans Administration hospital system, you can apply for benefits, which I've done many times to try to get some help with not having to be so stressed out about money. And they turn it down. You have to keep going. Usually it's like your fourth or fifth appeal when you finally get the rating you need. They rate you on a 100-point scale, like percentage-wise. I'm rated at 10%, which is $150 a month, which is great to have, but it doesn't, my bills are like $2,600. So trying to get, listen, the less money that I have to raise from people to get through this is great. I'm not looking to take people's money. I could care less about that. But, we all got to survive, right? You don't want to see Chip on the street corner with a cardboard sign. You're like, hey, that guy's got a nice sign. Anyway, let me put this on for a minute and a half. That should be enough to get it warmed up. Move away. Yeah, it is kind of sad that the VA, listen, they've done a lot to help a lot of people. I'm very grateful that I have a healthcare system that I can tap into. It doesn't cost me anything. So I get the drugs I need, which is a lot of pain medication. Well, actually, they stopped giving me the pain medication. I had to go outside the VA to get that, which really sucks. And I do have to tell you, without pain medication, there's no way I'd be talking to you right now. I'd be long gone. Because I have so many problems that if I don't take pain medication, I can't make it through the day. There's no way. And I know people that have been through this experience that have hung themselves. They get so sick of being sick, they just can't take it anymore. Hey, how you doing, Lee? Good to see you. And a lot of people are jumping over. Do me a favor, if you're somebody else, we have 168 people that are here, which is great. If you're somebody that's just coming on and you weren't on my previous live, can you type the number 1 in the chat? Because if I ask everybody who was, it'd be a ton of numbers. So if you're just seeing me on this channel and you weren't on the previous live on my main channel, can you type the number 1 into the thing? Thank you for doing that, by the way. Hey, Sheila. Sheila's here. I got to say, Sheila is an amazing human being. She kind of looks at her. She speaks of herself as someone who's, she's from Tennessee. And so a lot of people who are from the South or from the, Bible Belt, they have a distinguishable accent, right? They speak in a Southern accent. And so they have this perception that people don't have a high, they don't value them as much because they speak differently. But that's not, I don't feel that way. And sometimes the people who are more salt of the earth are the most amazing people, right? They're more giving. They may not have as much to give, and they give the most. And there's also people who've worked in restaurants. Sorry, my eyes are watering because of my cats. People who work in restaurants know this from their experience. People who make the least amount of money are the best tippers. And the richest people are the biggest assholes. Anyway, who knows? Maybe they just can't relate to the people who are struggling and working because they've never had to struggle. Grab my coffee. Anyway, I know it's the middle of a work day, so for those of you who have either taken off time or if you're able to watch me, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And the other thing I wanted to ask is, I'm wondering, one of the things that's been suggested to me, and I'm not quite sure I'm ready to do it yet, but some people have their lives set up so that the only people that can comment are like followers of subscribers for like 99 cents a month or $1.99 or something like that. So here's what I want to find out. If you wouldn't watch my lives, if that was the case, can you please type the number 2? Or anybody's, not just mine. If you had to pay a little something to comment, just type the number 2 because I want to get an idea of whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. And by the way, I'm not going to, I have no worry. If you write the number 2, I'm not going to give you a hard time. Because, I don't like to pay for stuff either, right? If I go on people's lives and if they force you to pay, I'm like, oh, damn. So I think that's a lot of the case with people. But just to let the audience know, and a lot of people are doing this now, not just me. Because we have to survive, a lot of content creators are shifting where they do certain things. So thanks, Lee. So, sorry about that. So basically what they'll do is, for example, especially with content that's controversial, right? If you're talking about subjects that could potentially get you brought down or somehow cause problems. And there is a lot of that on TikTok. Listen, I don't begrudge TikTok because it has a lot of audience members, which is cool. You can reach a whole bunch of people. But there's it's like being in a straitjacket sometimes. You have to kind of talk carefully. So nobody wants to be in a straitjacket, figuratively. So what content creators are doing is they're shifting to different platforms, trying to get their audience to watch them in places where they can be more, open in their dialogue. So somebody says, your content shouldn't be free, so I understand the sub chat only. Thank you, Falsa. Listen, there's a balancing act somewhere in there where it's just on the edge of worth it versus not. So I'm still trying to figure that stuff out. Anyway, that's not as important, right? The most important thing is getting the message out to the public, educating people, and getting them to push for some of these changes, more immediately for what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem, but eventually having a freedom and autonomy and dignity for Palestinians. That's the most important short-term concern. But the same problems that are keeping us from advocating through the political system for that issue are the same problems that are affecting all these issues, right? It's the same exact thing. And it's not going to be a quick fix, right? Which sucks because we need a quick fix for what's happening in Gaza. We couldn't afford it 2 weeks ago, a month ago. And to wait longer while Netanyahu or whomever does what they're doing, it's total tragedy, right? And what I'm amazed of, I'll talk about this stuff just a second, but I'm amazed. I watch people from different feeds that I get from, especially now in the southern part of Gaza, in the area they call Rafah, the last little sliver of Gaza down to the south. Their kids are playing. They're making the best of it. They're trying to have a good time. They're trying to live their lives as normally as they can, despite the abnormalities of having bombs dropping and family members gone and all the chaos. And they still maintain a good outlook, and they're positive. It's unbelievable. They don't feel sorry for themselves. They're just, all they want. It's a guy who visited the West Bank who was just heartbroken about what they do. He said all they want is to be left alone. Just leave them alone. Somebody mentioned merchandise sales. Like I could get a hoodie that says "Stop the Shenanigans" because that's something I say a lot as far as the censorship is concerned. So anyway, I don't want to become a pimp, like where people are thinking, oh God, another telethon, right? That gets old quick. But what I'm going to do, just to let you know, I have a website that I'm creating called, it's chipbarnesonline.com. It's not up yet. But when it is up, I'm the kind of person, I don't like giving money to somebody unless I kind of know it's not being used for someone's gravy train, right? You're like, why should I give money? Like David Pakman is a good example. If you don't know who David Pakman is, David is sort of a left of center political commentator. He's a believer in the system, so he's not my kind of guy. But, I think David has some reasonable approaches to certain issues, not the Palestine one. He's got a whack, but, I think a lot of people enjoy David because they like his style and whatever, and he's a professional guy, been doing it for like a decade. But David's always raising money for these memberships that he sells. And I don't know what David's lifestyle is, but he doesn't look poor. So when you're giving money to somebody who doesn't look poor or who's white, seemingly privileged like me, you're like, well, where's the money going? Like, is Chip just living it up when I'm not? So no, I'm not going to be living it up. I live a very Spartan lifestyle, but I've been very open. I think transparency is the most important thing when it comes to money, right? Especially these kind of relationships. So I've been very upfront. My monthly living expenses, if the VA starts to help me, it'll go down, right? But until they do, it's $2,600 a month. That's it. So I'm 56 years old. That's probably half of what most people my age spend every month. I don't have cable TV. I don't travel. I don't have fancy. Look, I don't have a watch on. I wear pretty basic clothing. I'm just a simpleton. And I like that. It's by choice. But even so, why take my word for it? I'm going to put everything up on my website. So if I do hire some people or whatever happens next, those will all be there as far as my expenses go. And then as far as what comes in, I'm going to have it all documented. So if you donate $100 through PayPal, if 5 people do that, it'll show PayPal $500. It may say Cash App $50, whatever. And that'll all be documented, so you'll know exactly where your donation goes each month or each whatever you do. And I think that's fair. So that's what's it. Yeah, nothing wrong with frugal living. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I kind of prefer it. I've by the way, when I was younger, I wasn't like the way I am now. I mean, let's face it. You learn as you get older. Even though I knew about the Palestine issue, I was still pursuing the typical path of like a young entrepreneur. You have to have a company or two. You got to make a lot of money. That's what's going to make you happy. All that, the whole story that we're sold in the capitalist society, right? And by the way, I did well with it. Hardworking. Kind of was able to make things happen. And every business I ran did really well. But I realized very quickly after like the third time I did it, it wasn't my true calling, right? It was something that I was able to do. It's like your baby, right? You want to make sure it does well, but it wasn't my passion. Excuse me, I got to blow my nose. Sorry about this. I'm going to put it on mute for 1 second while I blow my nose. I don't want you all to have to hear that. I have mild allergies to pet hair, but I love animals. So I have 2 cats and a dog. I care for and live with 2 cats and a dog, but cat hair especially, like many people. That's why my eyes start watering up. Anyhow, so, I think it's important to live a simple life. Basically, it's when I was doing what I was doing before, it wasn't making me any happier. I had more money. I was able to get a nice house and I had like 2 cars, ridiculous, right, for one person. But I realized it was just empty, right? And so I realized you got to do something that you love. And so I got to tell you, I was in a period of time after my last business where I was sort of trying to figure out what that was going to be. And by chance, I started doing this. And I think this is it for me, like teaching, talking, sharing is kind of what I like to do because I don't have a lot of skills. I play a little guitar, I play some golf, but that's about it. And used to be good at golf now as I've gotten older. But I think I'm pretty good at taking a lot of information and kind of distilling it down and then talking about it. I think that's a good thing. So you want to take what you're good at and give it the best way you can. Damn, a cat hair. Anyway, excuse my eyes. My eyes get red and watery sometimes. Anyway, so we all have that in us somewhere. They say that you don't want to go to your grave with the music still stuck inside of you, right? That's what they want. That's what you're supposed to do. So the goal is to figure out what the hell that is, and it has to have an intersection between competency, value to others, and then of course some way to cover your bills, right? So the third part is what's hard to do with this. I'm okay at it, and people seem to like it, but the other part I got to figure out, right? So that's kind of the next step. So I apologize to those who hear me navigating that process because you never want to have somebody who's constantly it's like somebody begging on the corner. It's like you're getting hit from every angle, like especially this time of year. Have you noticed at the end of the year, you get all these emails saying, hey, year-end fundraiser, it's just like, it's just too overwhelming. So I don't want to be that guy, that's for sure. Anybody coming up on the guest side? Make sure. Nope, no guest request. By the way, okay, I want to say this. The other thing I try to be is respectful and fair. Because I think we need more positive interactions between people. If you're never going to have peace or understanding if you're constantly yelling at each other or talking past each other. So, I'll give you an example. Thank you very much for the nice wishes, Morwena. I went to the pro-Israel rally in D.C., which is about an hour from where I live. And people are like, what the hell would you go there for? Like, you're pro-Palestine. Well, it's not because I try to really understand what other people are thinking. So by going there, I got to hear what all the politicians had to say, which was disgusting. And then I got to listen to other people and see how they're acting and stuff like that. So, learning about someone else thinks helps you form your thoughts better around an issue. And really, if you don't understand somebody where they are, you'll never have consensus, right? You got to think of both sides. So I do struggle because I think a lot of people don't know the totality of what people like you and I have come to learn about this issue. I do struggle hearing people say things that are uninformed or poorly informed. And they're making very demonstrative claims because they think they know what they know. And again, it's because of programming, right? I've had that programming when I was younger about my country, the American exceptionalism. And they get it far more in Israel. I mean, way more. And those people who live outside of Israel but whose families grow up with a Zionist flair, they get the same story. Israel's the good guys, we're the victims, all these Arab countries never want peace, all they want to do is attack us. That's the party line. And nothing could be further from the truth. They just want to be left alone and to have their own life, right? Somebody says, who are the mods today? I don't know if anybody is a mod. If you want to volunteer as a mod to come up, please do, and I'll set you up. If you don't know who a mod is, a mod is a moderator who keeps an eye on the chat if somebody keeps doing all caps or somebody keeps spamming or whatever. That kind of stuff. So right now we only have 108 people. Not only, I appreciate you being here, but I can do it with 100 people. When I have 300, 400, 500 people, it gets kind of dicey. Christos, you want a mod? Okay, let me put Christos on here. Christos, let me make you a moderator. And I'm going to give you the ability to take people off if you want to, Christos. So there you go. I just did it for you. Should be good to go. Thank you for all volunteering. So we were just talking about some pretty heavy issues. If you missed the first part of the live stream, I started out on my primary channel, and then I moved over to here. I was mentioning earlier a lot of content creators are doing things like that. And the reason is that if, it's like the old saying, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, right? And while I love TikTok in terms of the audience, the accessibility, the way the app works, I'm a big fan of just being scrolling through myself. It has some issues. Let's be real. If you may have heard this, if you haven't heard it, a lot of content creators are having their videos taken down for dubious reasons. We don't know exactly what pressure is coming in from elsewhere on TikTok or other platforms like Facebook, Instagram. But it doesn't really matter what's going on. The bottom line is it's going on, right? So because of that, we try to have other people meet us elsewhere so that if we do lose one part of the platform to meet you, we have another way of connecting. So I encourage people to follow me as many places as you're open to doing. I have a link tree in my bio. So if you want to follow my Twitter, for example, I have a list of all the people that I've followed for the last 20 years that are all on there. So I've learned a lot what I've learned from those people. So if you want to learn the same stuff that I've learned or follow the horse's mouth, they're finding things out before I do. I just watch their content and then I share it back with you all. Seriously, I'm like a thief. But there's a lot of great people out there that make stuff. I'll probably never be the guy with the fancy videos and stuff. A lot of people make some amazing stuff. But anyway, but if you go to my link tree, it has all my stuff. Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff. This normal stuff. And I'm moving more and more of my content onto platforms where it doesn't get messed with, right? Because to be an effective messenger, you have to tell the truth. You have to be able to communicate with your audience in a way that's straight up. And if people make that impossible for you to do for whatever reason, you have to do it somewhere where you can. So places like Rumble and Twitter have the least amount of interference. Let's put it that way. So when you're watching others for information, how do you know what's real and what's fake? A lot of it comes down to like anything else. Here's a question for you. How do you know when a friend is really a friend versus someone who's just, for whatever reason, not a good friend, right? Experience, time, trust. You see a pattern of behavior over time. You see who may be influencing them, why they're coming into your space in the first place, right? You have to make a value judgment. And by the way, you're going to be wrong sometimes. I've watched people in the past where I thought they were one thing, and then you find out they're taking money from some corporate source, and you're like, damn. So, just over time and experience. And I've had a lot of time to kind of see their behavior, figure out where they're coming from. And listen, you may find out stuff that I don't know about them. By all means, tell me if you think there's something, where they've been compromised. But, I think the people that I have on the list so far are pretty damn good. And I'm going to be adding some more. Periodically, I'll replace that with a new list. And, I think you'll find it useful. A lot of people have retweeted it or, sent me messages saying they appreciate it. So that's there. But what I wanted to say is if you're someone who believes the other side of this issue, often there'll be people in the comments or people watching, but they're too nervous to speak out or they don't want to create, me talking bad about them. I hate when I go to somebody's live as a guest and all I do is get talked down to and berated and called names and laughed at and all this other stuff instead of listening, right? And there's always something to be learned from somebody. So having the humility to accept that you may not be right about everything, because who cares? I mean, if you're not married to your opinions, it's freedom, right? You can just pretty much, as you run into new stuff, you can just say, okay. And it's not flip-flopping. It's incorporating new knowledge into your understanding of things. Damn it, fucking cat hair. Let me do my nose again. Sorry, guys. Apologize for this. Sometimes it bothers me more than others. That's why. Anyway, did you try Reds, REDZ? I've not gotten on Reds yet. For those who don't know what Reds is, it's an alternative platform that's supposed to have less BS, and I think it has a pro. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it has a pro oppressed point of view for both this conflict and others, of course. That's my guess. So, there's something called Clapper, that Quinn the Eskimo. If you don't know who Quinn is, he's a guy that's down in Cairo waiting to get into, I'm looking for a towel. Yeah, there we go. Looking to get into Gaza to help direct aid. And in the meantime, he's trying to figure out which aid organizations have the right kind of people that aren't going to take all the money like I was talking about earlier with me. So, by the way, there's a guy named Mansour, Mansour, who's, again, one of these people who's been vetted, and he does a daily update from Gaza. He's one of the good people down there. Not that they aren't all good people, but I'm just letting you know he's a good person. On his bio, he has a way where you can donate where the money is going to go to help people. And it's going to get directed in such a way that it can get to and do some effectiveness in the short term. Mansour. So yeah, Christos just put it in the chat. Are you able to pin that, Mansour? I think you can tap on the message and click on the word pin message or something like that. Anyway, it's MAN, like Mike Alpha November, Sierra October Uniform Romeo. That's the military that's my military background coming out there. So, and I've not gone through it yet. I should, because I want to make like a nice donation. But I'm just sharing that because I just heard about it yesterday. So there's that. And by the way, there's going to be a huge need. I mean, for those of you who care about this situation like I do, when the fighting stops, which it will at some point, right? Or the whatever you want to call it, the one-sided, slaughter. There's going to be a need for more aid than ever. That's when the big needs, and it's going to be off the news, right? All the news will move on to some other situation, and you're not going to hear about it as much. But that's when the real aid, that's when the real needs are going to be there, as people try to rebuild their lives and reconstruct their whatever's left at this point. I have no idea what's going to happen next. But somebody says I can get allergy shots for cat dander. Haven't pursued it, but it doesn't bother me. I know it happens periodically. I don't know why. It doesn't usually bother me, but I think I just cleaned a blanket and maybe it got whatever. Anyway, so if anybody has any questions, but what I was getting at, if you're somebody who has an opposing point of view, I won't disrespect you. I won't call you out. I won't call you names. I'll listen to what you have to say. If you go on an extended monologue, I'll probably stop you, because anybody who, like, even when I try not to do that. I try to say like a sentence or two and then either ask a question or shut up and listen. But some people just go on and on and on. Then you have to stop them. But otherwise, I'd love to have you come up. If you have a question I can answer, or if you want to just come up and say your point of view and tell me why you think I'm wrong. I have plenty of people in my comments tell me that, like in the chat of my videos. They're like, you have no idea what you're talking about. You've never been there. You don't understand this. Or how could you possibly know the history? Like, that's what I get told a lot. I'm like, well, I've been studying it for 34 years. I think I have some idea what's going on. But everybody's got their opinion, right? And then the other thing I was saying yesterday, in line with that, there were people in this pro-Trump live, and they were talking about the fact that it's a good thing that Donald Trump has been taken off of the primary ballot in Colorado and Maine, which are 2 U.S. states. And I was arguing the other side of the point. And I wasn't arguing that Trump is a great guy. I mean, I think Trump's got his things like any other person does. He's got plenty of things that really upset people. He's a divider, not doesn't bring people together, as you well know. But I don't think it's a good precedent to keep people off of ballots for dubious reasons. And the whole argument is, and everyone on the left keeps saying this, or most people say that, quote unquote, Trump started an insurrection. Well, first of all, if you look at the definition of an insurrection, what happened on January 6th did not have the ability to overthrow the entire U.S. government. Had no chance. It wasn't armed for the most part. And it was simply, I think what was happening was there was a lot of anger around the perception that the election had been stolen. And so people in that crowd were angry and they were kind of whipped up into a frenzy, which can happen with crowds, by the way. Crowds can be stirred up in such a way. So there are people who are making the case. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. And I know talking about January 6th can be very incendiary. And also these platforms, right? That and COVID-19 and vaccinations can be very contentious. But there are others who have made allegations that there were some way of that stirring up taking place that wasn't organic to the crowd. Best way I can put it. So somebody says they totally disagree. He meant to stay in power. I think what Trump wanted, again, because legally you can do this, he wanted a delay in the certification so that some of the state rulings that had been done that weren't favorable to his petition could get reviewed and maybe appealed, that might be able to slow or stop or change the vote count in a couple key swing states that would then swing the election in his favor. But as far as forcibly overthrowing things and taking power, there's nothing in the actions that he took that would indicate that. People are simply stating that because they want to believe that he's this monster. And is he annoying as hell to some people? Hell yeah. Does he do things that people really find objectionable in terms of how he treats women and how arrogant he is and how his following seems so cult-like? Yeah, I get that. That would upset people. But it's all about precedent. I don't want somebody who doesn't say, go storm the Capitol and take things over, to be blamed for having said that. Because people are interpreting what he said as saying that. But he didn't say that. Again, I'm not a MAGA person. I'm as far from that as you can get. But I think principles really matter. And precedent really matters. And so if you believe in a democratic system, when you start taking language that does not directly meet the standard for a legal definition, and then you apply it as such, and you interpret it as such within a state, that's dangerous in my opinion. And so therefore, what's going to happen, trust me, is those decisions in those cases in Colorado will be appealed within the state court system and if necessary to the Supreme Court. They will be found unconstitutional, because they are, and they will be reversed. Trust me. I'd be willing to bet anybody any amount of money if I had it to do it. Okay, do me a favor, Lulu. I'm happy to hear your point of view. Just please don't put it in all caps, because that kind of gets tough for everybody. So yeah, people have strong opinions about that. My family completely disagrees with me. They believe that Trump is the devil, and they watch MSNBC, and all they do is get really riled up that everything's Trump's fault. And if he gets back into power, we're going to have this fascist takeover of our government. Again, I think it's absurd. Now, there's things that the Trump administration does or did that will probably continue doing that I completely disagree with, one of which was a tax break that benefited primarily the top 0.5% of the wealthiest people in the world. Some of it did come down to the people, so people had, quote unquote, more money in their paycheck, which is, you could argue pro or con of that. But it added to the deficit and the national debt. Any tax break does that, because money you don't bring in is money that doesn't, go to that. So we're going to have to deal with that at some point. It's like a big credit card bill that just keeps on growing and growing and growing, and the interest each month keeps growing and growing, and eventually you have this massive interest bill that you can't even pay that. So that's the problem with that. There's a lot of people that think the 2024 election is like the most important thing for the future of the country. Every election they say that, right? What the Trump administration did was roll back some what I think are very reasonable regulations, in addition to others that may be deemed not as reasonable. But one of the ones they did was they changed the law with respect to the requirement for trains to be inspected for safety issues. And for those of you who don't know, there was a really, really big chemical spill when a Norfolk Southern train went off the tracks. It derailed in a small town just across the border from the western border of Pennsylvania, at the far east side of Ohio. And it was a town called East Palestine, funny enough what we're talking about here. And it completely made the place unlivable, including polluting the water. Animals were dying. It's terrible. People are going to get cancer. The whole Aaron Brockovich kind of stuff. And that was because a direct result of a decrease in regulatory requirements for inspections and proper braking systems for trains. That whole thing could have been avoided had that change not happened. So I can't directly blame Trump, but the actions of the Trump administration in rolling back some regulations led to harmful outcomes that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So when you put corporate profit above all else, and then you have problems that don't benefit society, I think that's dangerous. Now, does that mean Trump is automatically no good, has no good? Listen, no new wars started under the Trump administration. Now, that guy Soleimani from Iran was blown up, right? He was destroyed with Hellfire missiles. So that's an act of war against Iran, which, that's a horrible thing, like it or not. I don't agree with assassinating people. And Syria continued to be occupied. That Trump maintained that and even bragged about the fact that we're taking their oil. So that doesn't make him a good guy. So remember where he comes from. Okay, for those of you who are big-time Trump supporters, and I'm not trying to tell you what to do, you do whatever works for you. But he comes from the same class of people that are causing all the problems in our society. He even talked in the debates with Hillary Clinton, I used to give money to people like you. It's the people that give that money that are causing the problem, including Donald Trump. He's a product of that system. Now, he may say publicly he's trying to drain the swamp, but he doesn't. He does not. He hires people that are part of that system. He does a lot of the same things that benefit the system, like tax breaks. He's not a savior. There is no corporate savior. There is no government savior. This is the problem we have to get out of, is that you can't vote your way out of a power structure where the people in the system are contained by the power structure. That's it. It does affect certain social issues like Supreme Court justice appointments, which are very important. And Trump had 3. So you might argue that the balance of the court was shifted under Trump to a more conservative, pro-corporate court. I would agree with you. And they overturned something called Roe versus Wade, which was a federal statute that prohibited states from adjudicating the abortion issue. Now it's state by state. So if you're a woman living in, let's say, Texas, and it used to be federal law that Planned Parenthood could do business in Texas as far as women's reproductive health. Now the state can put in very difficult laws that require them to have hospital privileges or make it impractical for them to do business. So they have to leave. And then women who are deep in Texas, who don't have any money, let's say you're in Houston, Texas, you have to travel to the nearest state, which might be Louisiana or that state. So wherever the next state is that has these rules, so that means you can't do it basically because you can't afford it. So it makes people have kids, which you may not want to have because you're younger. Let's say you're a 17-year-old girl. You don't want to have kids. So some people think you should not be able to make that choice as a woman. Other people think you should. So I just feel badly for people that want to make that choice and can't because other people are making them, make a different choice because of their personal beliefs. I'm not for controlling other people on any level. So I wouldn't mandate people get, this in the arm. I wouldn't mandate that people can't do something. It's your body. So if you have a choice to get something in or out of your body based on what you perceive to be the health risks, why can't somebody adjudicate their body with respect to that part of their body? I think it's an inconsistency in application of thought. But I understand that people feel strongly about human life. I personally believe that we need less humans and that issue actually helps achieve that goal. It's not because I have any hatred for human beings. It's because the growth of the economic system and the associated population of any species, whether it's humans or otherwise, and they start having a negative impact on the balance of ecosystems, that's not a good thing. It's not about humans. It's about the same. My principles are always the same. It's not about the players. It's about the impact and who's on the wrong side of a power dynamic. So that's why I feel that. And I've talked about this before, and people probably vehemently disagree with this, but I think that every human problem, if you track it all the way back to the origin, is because humans believe they're superior. And the same problem we're seeing right now in the West Bank and in Gaza is because the Netanyahu group, that guy Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir and those types, and the settlers, come in with this attitude that they're superior. And by the way, that attitude is unfortunately pervasive throughout much of Israeli society. If you interview people off the street, like Abby Martin has done in Jerusalem, there's this pervasive attitude of them, they, the Arabs. They need to go back to Arab countries. They should just leave, right? That's superiority, right? That's looking at somebody as less than. And unfortunately, the Israelis always make the argument that people from Palestine are indoctrinated to hate Jewish people, right? I believe it's that's projection. It's the other way around. People are propagandized in Israel, unfortunately, to look down on people who they believe are squatting on their land that God gave them. That's how they think. Not everybody. I'm going to make that clear. There are people that break out of that, but that's what you're given as the starting point of your education. And that's no better than anybody who points to people who are in, small education. By the way, it's different from place to place. Not every school teaches the same stuff the same way. It's not uniform. But it's concerning. And if that happens at the Palestinian level, if it is geared towards Jewish people and not towards the occupation and Zionism, that's problematic, right? And some of the people who are from the H group who state unequivocally that they're against all Jewish people, I think that's wrong. I understand their anger and how they lump people together because it's an identifying factor that you see as part of the problem, and you assume everybody agrees with it. But just like the people who voted for the H group in Gaza, many of whom weren't even alive when that took place, right? And the election was even dubious at best because of outside influences, which I can get into some other time. They shouldn't be held accountable, and not everybody voted for the H group, right? So why should they all be lumped into a bucket? So it's all the same stuff everywhere you go, right? Let me see if I missed any questions. Sometimes I get to talking here, I don't listen as much. Sorry about that. Yeah, that was the biggest criticism I got from Heather, who used to be here. She said, you ignore the comments too much, man. You got to get better at that. So the problem is, listen, I like to look in the camera like I'm looking you in the eye. And when you're looking at the comments, you're looking down all the time. It's just, I don't know. I like people who talk to me like this, but that's just me. It'd be great if I had somebody consolidating the comments and questions. Like some people have an engineer. And while they're doing one of these things, they have somebody else who's kind of fielding that, and then they'll put up a question if somebody gives a super chat, which is like you donate $5 or whatever. And then you deal with the questions because they appear in bold on the screen. But right now, these things are scrolling through like really fast, and it's hard to keep up with them all. So anyway, so I personally believe, I've talked about this ad nauseum, that as much as you want to think that there's a big issue that can be changed big time. Somebody says, bring back Heather. Yeah, listen, I get it. I know it's frustrating if you ask a question and then there is one mod in here, Kevin, that's helping out. Thank you, by the way. But, if Heather does come back, we'll see. I think Heather decided there was greener pastures rather than working alongside of me. But that's okay. Smart woman. Anyway, so I just believe that the political process doesn't make as much of a difference as we would like to think it could, especially at the presidential level. Remember, if somebody could really change those dynamics, do you think they'd be allowed to be in the presidency for the big stuff with the economy and stuff like that? No way. So if people saw Donald Trump at the highest level as a threat to their well-being financially and otherwise, he'd never be in president. Or if he were, he wouldn't stick around very long. So he already served a term, right? And so things didn't change economically that much. People got a little bit more money in their paycheck, but it wasn't something that changed. It wasn't life-changing. So there you go. It's two wings of a similar bird, two-party system, but it doesn't make that big of a difference. And there's only one way around it, and that's to fix the problem that's causing that. So somebody says Trump wasn't too bad, actually. Every administration has pros and cons, right? I would argue that the regulatory framework was dismantled to some extent, especially with the person who was Secretary of Energy, who was horrible in terms of reducing pollution standards and stuff like that. Listen, Smokey, I talked about that. You may have just come on. I talked about the fact that no new wars started under Trump, which I think was a good thing. And the only thing that I don't like is he authorized the elimination of Soleimani, General Soleimani from Iran, who was a hero to most Iranians. And he also was bragging about the fact that the U.S. was occupying Syria and taking their oil. I mean, he publicly said that, which I think is wrong, to occupy a country and steal their resources, even if you don't like their leadership, right? That's not democratic. But, that's what he did. So, there's reasons why I'd like to see a Trump presidency as far as, peace and security. I don't believe that the Ukraine war would have started if Trump would have been in charge. I think he would have found a way to stop that. I think the North Koreans would be a much different state right now if Trump was in office. But who knows? Maybe it still would have happened. It's possible. And I don't know whether he would have been able to contain Netanyahu with what he's doing right now. He probably would have had a much bigger influence. I think Netanyahu looks at the Americans as bozos right now. But I think Trump's a strong enough personality. He's not the kind of guy you can just dismiss. And he's got a big enough ego that if he believes one thing should be that way, that's what he believes, and no one else is going to talk him out of it. So, but I do believe that in terms of peace, he's the best chance for the Americans, given that everything is messed up. But he's probably the least bad among them. Just like Jimmy Carter was, same kind of guy. But trust me, all U.S. presidents have blood on their hands in one way or the other. Every single one. Every single one. Well, I think what Trump said was, it's not a grudge. Somebody says Trump has a grudge against Bibi. Trump has publicly said that when he sat down with both Netanyahu as well as Mahmoud Abbas, who's the head of the Palestinian Authority, he said that Abbas was very kind, very soft-spoken, wanted to have a peace deal, was very willing to make compromises to get it, whatever the case may be. He wanted to make a deal. Trump's a deal guy. He's all about making deals. That's his shtick, right? He wrote a book called The Art of the Deal, for Christ's sakes. He had a shadow author, but it was his brand, his deals as a business guy. Well, he said he talked to Netanyahu and he asked him, so what kind of a deal do you want to work on? And Netanyahu just hemmed and hawed and kind of obfuscated. He's like, you don't want to make a deal, do you? So Trump realized that there is no path to peace from the Israeli perspective, at least under Netanyahu for sure. So he realized there's no chance of a deal because they don't want to have a deal. They blame the other side for not wanting a deal, but they create the conditions under which a deal could never happen because they're only offering bad deals to Palestinians. So anyway, all the peace processes have been hampered with Israeli control being included in the agreements. If you don't know what they are, read Norman Finkelstein. He outlays in painstaking detail of every provision and every negotiation that's ever taken place. And you'll understand very quickly that the Israelis never offered them autonomy. Every single thing requires Israeli control over security and commerce and transportation and all the key parts of life that you want to have freedom with. They didn't have a chance to get. So would you sign a deal like that if somebody basically controls their? You're like, no, fuck that, right? I wouldn't sign a deal like that. So the Israelis just can't let up the idea that they have the rights to the territory and they should be able to control everything that goes on within it because they have security concerns and no one should have a chance to even get to any place where they could, cause alarms. That's where it is. So somebody says you're the best. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. A lot of people disagree, especially those who are pro-Israel. They think I'm the worst. I've gotten some really mean messages lately that are saying things like you'll get what's coming to you and stuff like that. You have 6 months to live, like stuff like that. It's like, damn. So hopefully they're not right, but could be. Maybe the only way to stop somebody from being a nuisance is to stop them, right? I try to be fair. Listen, I'm not pro-Palestinian per se. I just happen to be pro the group that's been marginalized, and they happen to be Palestinians. And I'm against those doing the marginalization, which just happens to be Israeli Zionists, right? I'm against what my country does in many cases around the world. We're doing bad things to others, so I'm against my country for that reason. Not entirely, but for those reasons. So real quick, just, shift for one moment, and that is I have a link tree in my bio. If you don't know what a link tree is, and I pay for this, by the way, which is out of my pocket, it's a simple shortcut to all the places that I do stuff. And whether you know it or not, I'm not able to talk as freely here as I would like to. There's plenty of stuff I always want to say, and I kind of have to just skirt the issue. Because I know if I talk a certain way, I've had my lives taken down this many times for saying stuff that just is truthful, but boom, gone. So I don't want to have that keep happening. So if you want to listen to me in my entirety, which I really enjoy doing, I hope you'll check out my other stuff. And it's not because I want to send you away from TikTok. I love TikTok. But, if we lose each other because one of these things happens, we're not going to be talking again. I hope if you enjoy the conversation, we want to keep it going. So I have other stuff, like most people, you have TikTok, you have Instagram, you have Twitter, but I also have YouTube and Rumble. I'm working really hard to try to get those things going. It takes time. And right now I don't have any help. There's a few people that have offered to help me with video editing, but most of my videos are just real simple, like the ones we're doing now. I have recorded all my lives, which is great. I'm glad that TikTok records them and then you can download them. I'm going to upload them in their entirety, which takes a long time. Upload speeds are so slow. I had no idea internet upload speeds were so damn slow, but they are. So they're going up one by one in their entirety, and then you can either watch the whole thing, and then someone's going to help me go through and take out the clips that pertain to, like the Trump thing we talked about today. I'll probably clip that out and say why Donald Trump is good and why, or so Trump pros and cons or whatever, that kind of thing. So you can watch the specific segments if you don't want to watch the whole thing. Everybody does this, right? So there's that. Just to repeat my schedule, so those of you who don't know, my name's Chip Barnes, Army veteran, talk about geopolitics. My schedule is Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, it's from 12 noon to 2 p.m. or so. Sometimes if I have guests on, sometimes I'll go a little longer. One Saturday, by the way, and this is not going to happen again, but we had certain guests on. I just had to keep going because it was just no momentum. We went for 8 hours and 15 minutes, no breaks. I swear to God, that was the longest I've ever had alive. Now, in fairness, I had a guest on that was about for an hour and a half, Quinn from Egypt, which was great. A lot of people got to ask questions. Quinn the Eskimo, who's, by the way, if you don't know who Quinn is, he's a very famous TikToker who started this big initiative to go down to Gaza. He's in Cairo, Egypt, because no one can get in right now. But and the other part of the live was Fiona Ryan. If you don't know who Fiona Ryan is, and she came on unexpectedly. Someone had coordinated for her to come on, but I didn't know it. So as far as I knew, it was unexpected. But she came on, and if you don't know who Fiona Ryan is, she's another content creator who was arrested, which was, a big deal, because someone who's talking about these issues, why would they get arrested? And there was more to the story. A lot of people will say something, but there's more to it, right? So I did a video initially, kind of like, hey, what the hell? Why would somebody talking about Israel get arrested? That's and I got a lot of views. But then I started finding out more. People sent me a lot of feedback, like, why the hell are you talking about this? All that stuff. Like, they said I was platforming her, which I didn't know any better. So there were some issues, right, that had been brought up around fundraising, GoFundMe stuff. A lot of times in the past, it wasn't just one time. It was, whatever. There was questions about that, just like with Sean King. There's questions about his fundraising, which I can get into. And then there was the charges themselves. There was something called malicious communications. I didn't know much about Fiona's social media background when I first looked at her. I thought she was smart and knowledgeable and helping out Palestinians. Like, that great. But she had sent some stuff on Twitter in such a way, and also on her platform, which is her right, by the way. I don't want to tell anybody what to do. I'm a free speech advocate. But if I were Jewish, or if I were transgender, and I were to hear someone speaking that way, it would upset me. It has a very negative connotation to it, which is her right to do. And what she's saying is actually accurate per the English language, but based on the colloquial understanding of what terms mean, as far as like anti-Semitic and stuff like that, it doesn't help the cause for us, I don't believe, to unnecessarily get fingers pointed at us, calling us anti-Semitic because of how we use our language. If you can make the same point without that, do it, right? But that's not my choice for her. Somebody says, is she actually bad? I'm not going to make a judgment call about that. It's up for you to determine whether someone's good or bad, okay? My perception was this, if you want to know my take. My take was, I disagree with her use of language, but I support the way she wants to communicate because she feels like that's important to her. She wants to be able to communicate in a way that's unbridled, unconstrained, and she thinks that any constrainment of her speech is identity politics and oversensitive snowflakes. Okay. Somebody says I was dismissive to her. I talked over her. That was all a setup. Actually, I didn't even know she was coming on. Let me tell you why I stopped things, okay? She kept saying during the conversation that obviously I didn't want her to be able to talk the way she wants to. I never said that to her. She kept saying that over and over again. I said, Fiona, I just want to stop you. You're, in my book, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, is totally your business. I don't want to tell you anything. I'm simply letting you know from my opinion that I think if we can get our point across and be critical of Zionism and the things that are being done by the Israeli government, that's sufficient without giving other people the ammunition to come back at us and call us names and marginalize us, right? And I'm always very careful to make those distinctions. And that's my way of doing stuff. It doesn't mean that she has to do it that way. I was simply pointing out the distinction. But other people viewed it as me stepping on her, telling her what she can. God bless. And if you're someone who prefers that really straight up style, who isn't concerned at all with who gets bothered by it, go watch Fiona, because she's good at it. She's talented. She knows a lot. But there are other issues that people accuse her of too, like dubious fundraising and kind of woe is me, I'm a disabled woman, Take that for what it is. You do with it what you want. I stopped watching her content because I thought it was just chock full of too much of that stuff for my taste. But that doesn't mean that I'm right and she's wrong, or doesn't mean that she's right and I'm wrong, right? It's about style and it's about takes, and everyone's got theirs. It doesn't make it, it is what it is, right? And for whatever reason, that's where she is. I think she has a lot of disdain for groups of people that came from Europe into Palestine and colonized it. And I don't blame her for feeling that way. And she likes to use sterner language to interpret that having happened. And that's her right. And I support her right to do that. I just don't want it done on my platform because I think it's inappropriate and unnecessary to do it. And she kept saying some things that repeated the things she'd put on Twitter trying to justify it. I had to stop that because I don't want that on my lives. I just don't want it on there. I think it has no place in the discourse, but it's her right to do it, just not on my channel. That's what I said. Her name is Fiona Ryan. And by the way, I don't have an agenda to try to harm Fiona. Now, after this interchange, unfortunately, a lot of people that are very strong supporters of her style or her followers started coming at me and saying things like you heard on here a second ago, like you were unfair, you were condescending towards her. I can respect your point of view if that's how you feel. But I thought I was very straight down the middle, like I try to be with everything else. And I don't want to have somebody who's rambling in ways that are, in my opinion, if I were Jewish and heard someone speaking the way she was, especially the tone in which she says it. Sometimes you can say something like the N-word with the AH on the end in a way that's not like hard or mean-spirited. You can say a word in a way that's colloquial and that's sort of casual and more not directed in a mean-spirited way. And I believe the way she talks comes across as being directed towards, talking down to people who happen to be from a certain ethnic group. I don't think that's fair. But I respect David Duke, the known racist from the United States, and Nick Fuentes. People don't like Nick either. I totally respect their right to talk about anything they want, whenever they want, however they want. And I think the best thing to do with speech that you find disgusting is to speak against it in ways that point it out for what it is and tell them, I'm not down with that. That's bad speech, and this is why this is a better way. So I'm not comparing, by the way, I'm not comparing Fiona Ryan and Nick Fuentes. Make sure that's right. Or David Duke. I'm simply doing that from a free speech standpoint. So I don't want to go off on a total tangent. What I'm letting you know is that segment was on this very long live, so it just took longer, and that chunk took about 45 minutes or whatever. And so did Quinn, took like an hour and a half. So anyway, I got a chance to not talk for a while, which is good. Speaking of which, I got to grab some more water. Excuse me. Thank you. All right, so let me ask some questions here. Why people in 2024 still buy into the God's chosen people show proof of being chosen? When it comes to spirituality and beliefs in higher power, it's hard to argue with that because somebody has that belief. It's very well, there's no evidence to support it on anybody's religion, right? There's no direct evidence. People will claim that the books that were written are evidence of their beliefs, but they're really not. They were written by men at a certain point in time, and those books in and of themselves are interpretations of what they believe were the times in which these things came to them. But that's not proof, in my opinion. That's just an interpretation of how they view their relationship with their higher power. So why do people from Israel in 2024 still believe that it's their land? Because they've been brought up in an environment where their interpretation of their culture and their ethnicity and their beliefs, that it's theirs. That's their culture and their beliefs, just like other people believe the exact opposite. And unfortunately, those things collide, and then you have what we're seeing now. But if you look at, and by the way, no society is homogeneous, right? Not everyone from Israel believes that they're God's chosen people and that the land is theirs to take and do with what they're not. There's a good contingent of people in Israel that are not, they don't believe that. They're more secular. And they've denied that narrative. But there are a lot of people in Israel that look down on people because they have security concerns, which I think are valid, even though a lot of people view the creation of their state as invalid and they shouldn't have a right to any security. When you have a bus that goes boom or you have a cafe that goes boom, I can understand how that has an impact on people in terms of how they feel going out to eat dinner or whatever. So when tactics are used that are unconventional, people get outraged. Just like in the American colonies, when the British was occupying the eastern seaboard of the United States, what's become the United States, at that point it was just North America, the American patriots, who we refer to as, the freedom fighters that started our country, our founding fathers, they fought back using unconventional tactics, both against the British troops as well as against the British families who took homes and occupied the territory. Literally, there were British troops that took homes and farms and, plantations from Americans, kicked them out, and then they were living there, and Americans would go in and unalive everybody, top to bottom. Now, the British were outraged by this. What word do you think they used to describe the behavior of the Americans, the colonists? Terrorists. That's what they called them, because they used unconventional tactics to resist an occupation. It's no different here. You can try to frame it however you want, but when you oppress another people, you occupy territory where they've been living for several hundred years. No matter how you want to frame it, they got moved off their land at one point. Now they're situated elsewhere. You're further moving them off their land. You blockade a section of land where they live, which is an act of war. And then you occupy all the people in the eastern part of a city that both people believe is their spiritual center and their capital. And then you mistreat them for decades, and you make their lives as miserable as you can, and then they dare to fight back. How can you be surprised by that? That's obvious. Any of us under those circumstances, if we have half a bit of common sense, would not take that indefinitely. And periodically, you just can't take any more. You've had it, and you're going to fight back. You just have to. And look what's come of this. Let's be honest, okay? There are military objectives, right? There are other objectives at play that are political. And look what's happened here. Now, the Israelis were pretty much continuing to do what they were doing, slowly but surely displacing Palestinians and slowly but surely breaking up villages and taking more land and creating more settlements. And it was like the frog in the water approach. Well, what the Netanyahu government has done is they've put people in boiling water. And everybody from the world is seeing it, and they're outraged by the fact that they're boiling people, basically, right? Whereas before they were warm watering them into acquiescence and removal. So they put it on steroids. Now the world saw it. So by virtue of this attack, the response, which is they knew it was going to come to some form of a larger degree, it's going to get a lot of attention. It's going to raise awareness to their plight and their issues. So now there's a lot of people pushing for a peaceful resolution that weren't before, right? So in that sense, it achieves the other objective it had. There's so many Palestinians that are being held in detention in Israeli prisons and jails. So the primary goal of the mission was, one, to resist, to show that they're not going to take it, because the Israelis were basically messing with the Al-Aqsa Mosque and doing all sorts of things to desecrate the point of their third most holy site in all of Islam. But this had been planned for a long time, let's face it. So it just happened to coincide with that. I don't think that, but it was called the Al-Aqsa Flood because of that. That's what they named the operation. And it accomplished two things, in my opinion. One is, and put the tactics aside of who got unalived and how, because every group that resists, there's some of this going on, just like in America when we were being formed. You had a lot of people taken hostage. That was the point of the operation, was to take a lot of people hostage and try to use that as leverage to get the 7,000 or so people that have been taken hostage for marginal crimes like stone throwing. You got a kid that throws a stone who's 12, they put him under a military court, they charge him and stick him in jail for 20 years. That's crazy, right? That's a hostage. That's not equal application of justice. So that's what was going on there. That was the primary purpose. Well, obviously the Israelis have taken a position, that Hannibal directive, where they're not going to try to negotiate with that. They're going to just do what they got to do. They don't want to release prisoners. The previous administration released like 1,100 Palestinians or so to try to get one body back of a deceased Israeli soldier. And that outraged people on the right. They were like, no, that's not right. They disagree with it, but they weren't in charge. So it's Gilead Shalat, if you don't remember the soldier's name. So the Netanyahu government's like, no. So now that they're in power, they have this other way of doing things called the Hannibal Directive, where they pretty much won't worry about their hostages as much as they want to try to eliminate the enemy. So if the hostages have to go with that, it's like tough turkey. That's what happened during the, there's a lot of evidence that points to the fact that many of the civilians, quite possibly, who are listed on the 1,147 people who are no longer on the planet from the Israeli side, that were harmed by the response by the military under this Hannibal Directive. There's Apache helicopter footage, there's tank footage in the kibbutzes. Evidence has come out, not just conjecture. So we don't know exactly who did what, where, and how. I've seen video with my own two eyes where I've seen about maybe 15 people being directly, while it's happening, unalived by H group members. That's what I've seen with my own two eyes. though many in Israel claim there's much more evidence of all sorts of more harsh things happening, graping, burning, mutilation, whatever. Those videos are supposed to be released to certain audiences, but nobody else. And my point is, if you have evidence, I believe it would be circulated widely, rather than talking about the existence of evidence that you don't circulate. So I have a tendency to distrust what the Israeli government says, not because I think that they are bad people. They have a history and pattern of not telling the truth about things that later turn out to be not true. The 40 babies, right? All the comments that first came out in the beginning of the conflict were overblown atrocity propaganda to anger and outrage people, to stir up support for this massive response we're seeing. And a lot of it still sticks. It was out for about a week, and all the networks ran with it. And the President of the United States said he saw it. He goes, I never thought I would see images of babies with their blank, cut off. He said that publicly. He never saw that. He was told to say that at a press conference, and he never saw it. So the President of the United States was in on the misinforming of the public. Maybe not necessarily that he thought one day he woke up and said, how can I lie about this? He was fed that from his staff saying, this is a point we need to get out to the public. That's propaganda in its purest and most unadulterated form. So, the thing is about Israeli propaganda, it used to be very, very subtle and very good. It's gotten blatantly, outrageously obvious. It's gotten pathetic. Like what they did at the Al-Shifa hospital. They went behind an MRI machine. They said they found grenades and a rifle. You can't have metal within 30 feet of one of these machines. It'll blow it up. So it's absurd. And then when they took the pictures of the go bag with the weapons, the first video they showed had a single rifle. When they took the photographs to document it, had two rifles. Somebody threw in an extra rifle to make it look worse, who's a different person that didn't take the first video, to stage it. And, it's all been that going on writ large. It's all just silly. They've taken video of Israeli soldiers storming certain places, saying they've unalived people. They're just shooting at walls. They're not doing anything. I've been in combat. I know exactly how it works. It doesn't work like that. So anyway, we're a little bit after 2 o'clock. Does anybody have other questions? Because I got to get the dog outside at some point. If you want, but I can keep it going. I just have to walk outside with the dog. If you want me to keep going, do me a favor. Type a number 1 in the chat. If you want me to shut it down because you're tired of hearing me talk, type a 2. And I'll get off of here if you don't want to keep hearing me. And I have enough battery power to carry me outside. I'm going to have to wear a pair of sunglasses, though. It's really bright. Okay, I don't mind doing it, but I do have to cook my coffee real quick, so give me a second. How do I think the conflict will end? That's a tough question. The answer is, I think with most people, I'm not sure. It really depends on what the Netanyahu government decides to do. He's under tremendous pressure, by the way. I don't know if you know this, but if you look at the Israeli news, he is under tremendous pressure for a lot of different things. And he was beforehand. But people are angry about the hostages. They are outraged that they're still being held. Bring them home is the biggest political theme right now in Israel. Michael Rappaport, that American sort of fifth-rate, D-level celebrity who's been talking smack about this. I had to block there on Twitter. I got so sick of hearing about him. But that's what they're talking about. It is bring them home. Noah Tishby, for example. So, I don't blame people. In our country, in 1979, when the Iranian Revolution took place, we had a bunch of hostages that were taken from the different embassies and places like that, diplomats, that were held for more than 440 days. Like a crazy amount of time, like a year and 3 months. And they were only released when a new president came in who could claim the release. But they were ready to go 3 months earlier, which is really sad. But people want their people back. Rightly so. But the Israelis are unwilling to negotiate a swap. Netanyahu is under tremendous pressure right now to cave and swap. And he won't do it. So his days are numbered. He's done. He's finished. But he's still in power. And like any other war situation, even George Bush, people didn't like George Bush, but when we had the Iraq War, people rally behind the leader because you kind of have to. It's like you versus them. You can't have a leadership issue in the middle of a you versus them issue. I got to put on my microwave for a second, just a second. Time cook 1:25 start. So anyway, anybody else want to come up and talk for a second? I'd love to have somebody as a guest to have some interaction with, because I like monologuing to an extent, but it gets a little old when I'm just yapping the whole damn time. Let me see if I can force somebody to come up here. We have Asme. I'd like to hear from her. Sheila. I always like to talk to Sheila. She's a nice person. She's a little bit self-conscious about her accent, though. I'm trying to see if I have anybody here who I can put on the spot. Heather S. No, I don't know. I don't really know much. Thank you for being here, by the way. I don't recognize a lot of the names, so thank you for watching. Let me tell people who I am then, if you don't really know. So my name is Chip Barnes. I go by Chip all the time. And I've been on here for about 8 weeks. I'm kind of brand new on social media, so forgive me if I'm not at the level of others. But I learned about the Palestine issue when I was in college, so 34 years ago. And it really hit me hard because it was totally different. One of my classmates gave like a senior paper on the first Intifada, which was 1987. It was a big uprising by the Palestinian people. And it totally shattered what I didn't know much about it. I didn't know there was a Gaza Strip or a West Bank. I was just a young guy having fun, right? So it totally shattered what I thought I knew about Israel, and I just felt so badly for the Palestinians. So that's what got me into this issue, and I've been sort of studying it as like a hobby ever since. So I came onto social media very close to the time that what happened on October 7th. So out of pure luck, I was somebody who knew something about it, who happened to be American, and I was able to talk to it in a way that a lot of people, felt there was some good information flowing. So I lucked into that. I'm an Army officer, former Army officer. I was in a tank unit that was deployed to the first Persian Gulf War in 1990. So I've been in combat, been on the front lines of a war. Combat sucks, and I know how badly it is for the Israeli forces right now that are coming into this urban terrain, and they're just sitting ducks. And if you don't know this, tanks are very vulnerable on their sides and especially the underside and the back, because they're meant to fight at long range with the front of the vehicle facing the enemy, and so most of the armor is towards the front of the tank. So the underbelly is very susceptible to mines blowing up, and the backs and sides of the tank are also very vulnerable. So you don't have to blow a tank up to make it disabled. You have to just destroy the tracks, and it can't move. So a lot of times you don't have to have a massive explosive, and a lot of times you don't even need to unalive the crew. Sometimes that happens. But if you disable the vehicle, you're taking like a $10 million tank and with a $500 rocket, and you're just disabling it, which is a pretty good deal, right? So, yeah, by the way, when I was in a tank unit, oh my God, man, when you're an officer, because I was an officer, you have to learn everything. Because when you are delegating work to your staff, you have to know every little inch of it. So we had to learn how to fix tank track. And if you've never worked on, it's so heavy and it's all metal and it's just so hard to work with. And we were working on it at Fort Knox, Kentucky. It was raining, it was cold, and we were in this massive mud with water. So we had to work on tank tread underwater in the cold weather with freezing. It sucked. So I can tell you this, the Army is no picnic. But it's good because, I like to say, I've been to jail too. Been to jail 3 times, not for anything major, but I've spent probably a total of 7 days in jail in total. And I always like to say, if you're not in war and you're not in jail, it's a good day. It's a great day. So, because it gives you perspective. When you go to a place where you don't have a shower, you don't have any of the conveniences of life, it makes you appreciate it so much more when you get back. Like, you don't have any, like the food. We had these prepackaged frozen meals that suck called MREs, meals ready to eat. And I'm telling you, you eat those for like 6 weeks, and all you want is anything else. Like, you want just some real food. Stuff just sucks. And I need coffee. Okay, we do have a guest now. Somebody says, can I date you? Listen, my personal life is non-existent. I gotta tell you, I would love to meet somebody. I haven't dated in forever. And I was probably close to being married at one point, but it just didn't play out, which is fine. But no kids and no desire to have them. So a lot of people who've met me want to have kids. So that's not for me. So I was in jail for marijuana-related offenses. I was growing marijuana at one point in 2012 in like a little warehouse before it was legalized. So now this is my backup account. Somebody's asking this is a new. I'm doing half of my lives on my primary account, and in order to get people to follow me on my backup account, I'm doing the other half on the backup. So that way. Yeah, listen, I would love to meet somebody. I mean, I'm kind of a really basic person. I don't like to, I don't like to travel a lot. I'm not a glamorous person, which I think kind of makes me a little less attractive to a lot of people. But I help animals. I try to, learn a lot of stuff, and that's me. I like to be out in nature, but I'm not doing so great either because of the Gulf War stuff. So, when you have health issues that are kind of dragging you down, that's also not fun for somebody either, right? Yeah, I mean, I eat mostly. Someone says I'm a vegan lover. I eat mostly a vegan diet, not perfect, but I had to change my because of my health issues. I haven't been able to exercise as much, and so I had to change what I was eating because I was starting to gain weight, which I don't want to gain weight. Thank you for the likes. Thank you very much, Hearts Lover. So I don't know what it is about me. I just don't. If you're happy in whatever form your body is, God bless. But for whatever reason, I have this really fear about gaining weight. So I had to change what I was eating because I was still eating the same stuff but not exercising. Because I got away with it for a long time. Trust me, I was eating whatever the hell I wanted to. So, somebody says the woman that gets you will be winning the lottery. That's Shield. Thank you, Shield. That's very kind of you to say. I'll remind her of that, by the way, if we ever get in a fight. Hey, you know what? You're a lottery winner with this one. Appreciate that. Okay, so we have Mayday coming on. By the way, if you don't know who Mayday is, she is someone who has been, she's old school, not that she's older, but she's been through some situations where she understands the political process and she's seen a lot of history. So how you doing?
Oh, thank you, Chip. Yeah, I'm doing good. It's good to be on your live. I enjoy your lives always. You're very informative, and I thank you for that. I wanted to get your opinion, or wanted to ask you a couple of questions. One, what impact do you think South Africa will have in their coming out and saying, what they've said?
Let's answer that. So, for those who don't know, South Africa, which used to be an apartheid state, now it has government that's basically based on the majority of the country, which is African descent. People of pigment, and they put together a petition. Not to the ICC, not to the International Criminal Court, but to the International Court of Justice, which is a different organization, that basically outlined crimes against humanity and war crimes against the Israelis, and probably with a proxy to the Americans. I didn't see that in the document, and so the question is, will it have teeth, right? And here's the problem with the international justice system, because international law is a thing, but laws are only as good as their enforcement, right? You can have a law in the books, but if like speeding, for example, but if you don't have speed cameras and the cops aren't doing it, people just speed along. The problem with the international court system is the U.S. and to some extent the Western power structure under NATO deems itself above and beyond reproach. They do not get affected by any of these bodies because they've even said publicly, and this is no joke, the ICC is headquartered in The Hague, where the people from the Mustache Man were convicted and a lot of them executed in World War II or after World War II. They've said publicly that if any of their citizens are ever arrested and taken to The Hague, they will invade and occupy the country and free them. That's a pretty big deal, right? So basically, the rules don't apply to us, is what it comes down to. So I do not think that any of these actions will ever lead to any sort of accountability for Israel or the United States because of the current power dynamic, unfortunately.
So Israel is saying that the rules don't apply to them.
Of course,
Or,
because they have the United States backing them up, which definitely the rules don't apply to.
right. Okay, well, thank you for that. And I also wanted to ask you about, because I get a lot of people telling me that these statistics about the deaths of children are coming out of Hamas and not Israel. And then when you try to get statistics that are coming directly from Israel, they always seem to be quoting Hamas. They don't seem to be coming directly from Israel. Could you tell me how to get around that?
If just for those of you who want to mention that group, we have to say alternative
Oh,
terms.
oh, oh,
It's
I'm
silly.
sorry. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay.
I
Um,
have CRS. I can't remember shit.
oh, that's fair. That's
That's a
fair.
joke.
Yeah, I think
I'm sorry. I'm 74, so you have to
as
forgive
you
me.
cross
But
the
I
five,
know,
yeah.
that is a rule. Okay, the age group, yeah.
So
Uh,
for those
Go
who
ahead.
don't know, as you start to cross the different higher decade counts, like 5, 6, 7 decades of life, the CRS factor kicks in unfortunately far too frequently, which is a problem.
Right.
right? We all know it. So, okay, well, to address your question, I don't know for sure what the numbers are. I do hear a lot of arguments from the Israeli side that they don't believe that the numbers reported by the health authority and that's run by the H group in Gaza is reporting accurately. But I have no reason to doubt it either, because they're the names of every single person that's ever been unalived is on a registry that's been reported, and it's kind of hard to fake that, right? If you have somebody, by the way, if you don't know this, the Israelis keep the same registry. They understand who's what, where, and when in both the West Bank and in Gaza. So it's pretty amazing the kind of information they keep.
So it looks like it's about 28,000 people that have been unalived in the last 83 days, 84 days, or however long it's been.
Whether it's 21, 22, or 28, it's equally horrific. I don't know the
Right.
exact number, but it's beyond comprehension.
Absolutely unconscionable. But and other things, people saying, "Oh, we should not pay attention to what's going on because there's so much going on in the United States, like homelessness and things that we should be paying attention to here, like the election, whatever, instead of, what's going on." What would you respond to that? How would you respond to that?
Are you talking about with homelessness? What do you say about that? Is that
Well,
what
I
you?
get people telling me that my concern is misplaced, that it's a situation that's going on, away from the United States. We should focus on what's going on here, they say,
Yeah.
instead.
Well, I think, talk about walking and chew gum. I think what people are upset about is the money that's being allocated by the government to some of these foreign misadventures. The whole emphasis on Ukraine was if we just keep giving them money and weapons, they can overcome and outlast the Russian aggression. That was the party line. Obviously, that's not been the case. And the writing was on the wall many, many, many months ago that the Russians, like it or not, had a superior military, that even though the Ukrainians have a very effective military, it was just a little too much with the artillery. And of course, now with the drones that the Iranians have been sending to the Russians, it made a big difference in turning the tide of the battle on the front. So that's an issue. So I think people see things like what happened in Hawaii. And for those you don't know, on the island of Maui, there was this massive fire that swept across a good bit of the working class neighborhoods where many of the homes were completely burned down. And a lot of children who stayed home from school that day were, unfortunately, were in the buildings when this fire went through. You can imagine how horrific that must have been. So families, in some cases, lost most of their family, all of their property, and they were completely displaced into these little camps, just like we're seeing now with some people where they're living as a refugee. And our government, in its benevolence, offered each surviving family $700. $700. So if you don't know, in Hawaii, everything's way more expensive because it's an island. Everything has to be shipped in from elsewhere, so it costs a
Right,
lot. So
yeah,
$700 is like groceries for 2 weeks for a family. So
right.
imagine losing everything in your life and having the grief of surviving and trying to figure out what you're going to do next. And your government says, "Hey, you know what? We're here for you. Here's $700."
I know.
That's why people are angry, because they see billions of billions, hundred plus $1 billion getting sent to Ukraine, but they can't afford to give more than a couple $1 million to people who are completely marginalized and lost their life.
Yeah,
I
and Israel has free health care for all their citizens and free uh, tuition for college. And here, people are, are going bankrupt, or they're becoming homeless because of health problems and uh, other horrible things happening. It's awful. It's just
Yep.
I um, I just appreciate you so much, Chip. So wish you a happy new year, and I hope people will support the watermelon content more, because the censorship is very heavy on all social media. So if people can, remember to like and support any watermelon content. They know what watermelon content is, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody remembers. Thanks for coming up, Mayday. I appreciate your
Okay. Thank
response.
you. Thank you,
Take
Chip.
care. Yeah. If you don't know, May was somebody who was involved with the protesting during the Vietnam War, which is in the 70s. And eventually that war came to an end. As you well know, the U.S. was defeated, and there was huge pushback against the war. Because if you don't know, there was a draft that took place throughout the late 60s and early 70s where there was a draft number. And if your number was low enough, you got picked to go to the war. You had to go or you go to jail, which is crazy to think, right? So, and by the way, just so you know, for the moderator here, please let me bring up the folks, Christos, because, okay, you said you copied, good enough said. Alejandro, if you're in the waiting queue, there's a lot of background noise where you are. So if you can either get free from that or turn that off or whatever you can do, because we're not gonna be able to have you up if the background noise is there. Zach, you've been waiting patiently for earlier. So thanks for coming over here. Let's let Zach talk a little bit about what's on Zach's mind.
Uh, Chip, thanks for having me up. I want to wish you health and wealth for the new year,
Thank
especially in
you.
difficult times. Um, I I recognize that you are pro-Palestinian, and you brought on Liam um, to help educate yourself and your audience. I recorded that video to go through it with a Middle Eastern scholar.
Hmm.
Um, it's I did look at also his videos on his profile. They
Okay.
are they're not even misleading. They're just completely wrong. So
Okay.
I recognize I that you want to have a scholar on to help educate yourself and your audience. I
Yeah.
even when you were interviewing him, he said he's not a Middle Eastern scholar. He's not familiar with the conflict that's going on in Gaza, right? So this is not his area of expertise. So
Did
I'm
he say that?
encouraging you.
I don't remember him saying, I'm sorry to jump in. I don't remember him saying anything to that extent. Did I miss that?
Yes, this is not his area. That's just quite simply. So I'm encouraging you, if you want to bring a scholar on,
Yeah.
bring somebody on, and maybe from both sides, one who's pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli, but
Yeah.
this guy is just not educated in this area at all.
Listen, I'm certainly happy to entertain your point of view on that. Thank you for bringing it up. Um, you know, my impression from based on my memory, like I said, I just said to May a second ago, we can't remember some stuff. My recollection of that, I have it recorded as well. I'll probably pull segments out of that to put up on there, but I don't want to put anything out that's inaccurate. But
It's just bad. I mean, I started going through it, and
yeah,
then I also took the transcript and I was putting it into ChatGPT to,
wow.
to to debunk it. And you know what? He's just over. I mean, he says in there, "This is not my turf," and and so I get that you have your bias or your position, maybe because your heritage is Palestinian. I
Nope.
don't know what it is, but
Nope.
I would encourage you to have a scholar on or have a scholar on from both sides. But
Uh,
this ain't the guy.
let me put you on pause for a second. So the presumption that, and maybe you haven't followed me for long, so maybe you don't know any differently, but the presumption that I have a background that's maybe my heritage is involved in any of my analysis is incorrect.
Well,
So
I don't know,
no,
right?
let
I
me
mean,
let
yeah,
me talk for a
yeah.
second, okay? I'm going to put you on hold because I keep interrupting me. So let me just clarify a couple things about what you said because again, I want to get it right. So if there are things that are being said by a guest or even by me that are incorrect that somebody can point out, I hope they will because I'm open to that completely. But what I don't want people to do is to take a supposition that they have no evidence to support. I'm assuming you don't know my heritage or my background, and you're making it an assumption that's incorrect. I don't know anybody who lives in Palestine. I never have. I don't know anybody who lives in Israel. I knew one guy that was from Haifa, who I knew for a few years. We don't contact each other anymore. So that's my background when it comes to, I don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. I just happened to learn about this when I was younger. And the reason why I take the position that I take is not necessarily because the Palestinians. I take the position that I take because they're the ones who are being oppressed by a large, well armed, well backed oppressor who's been doing that in more punitive ways over the decades. And it was unfair what happened to them in the beginning. Not that unfair things don't happen all the time in the world. And I know my country is a product of an unfair happening with the indigenous population, and I'll let you back on in a second. I'm not trying to keep a monologue, but also to touch on the Liam thing. Now, I've heard Liam talk about Gaza extensively from watching his lives, and I've never heard him say one thing that didn't match up with all the books that I've read from the different scholars that I've studied to learn what I learned. So I'll give you an example. I read The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by Ilham Pape. I've read all of Norman Finkelstein's books. I've read Alan Dershowitz's book, The Case for Israel, to try to better understand where the scholarly positions are on these. I appreciate your idea of bringing up opposing people. My format, just to let you know, and you may know this, is I rarely have multiple panels. I find it difficult to manage people who start to jump in, interrupt each other and stuff. I don't like that type of format. I go to people's lives sometimes who use that format, and I can't follow it, and it's very frustrating. So that's one of the reasons I do that. Now, if there are segments of the recording where there's factual inaccuracies, whether I say it or otherwise, I'm happy to entertain that. So what I would hope you would do, I'll give you my email address, and I'll also give you my Telegram address. If the files are too big to put up on email, you can put them up on Telegram. So you can reach me at chipbarnesonline@gmail.com, which is my open email for people to contact me. Or you can go to my Telegram, which is just my name, Chip Barnes. Or you can go to a browser and type in T as in Tom, .me, like t.me/Chip Barnes. It'll take you to my message. So I disagree based on my recollection with what you're saying, but I'm also happy to look into what you're saying. So if there is an inaccuracy, I can get it right. I hope that's a fair response. Let me put you back on here.
That's respond. But I did see that you have a certain bias. By the way, the book by Elam Pape, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, is highly criticized by, I don't want to use the word legitimate historians. He is a history professor, to my recollection, in the UK, but the ethnic cleansing of Palestine is a collection of anecdotes, and that book has been highly criticized. So I get that it's great that you read that book, but I would read a history book, would be my recommendation. And
Well,
again,
I think, Zach,
it
in fairness, the way you're coming across, and maybe I'm taking it differently than the audience, but the way you're saying things is basically condescendingly. You don't know what you're talking about because of what you've done. Do some real research, and you'll
well,
figure out what's going on.
I'm just making it clear that that book, Ethnic Cleansing, has been highly criticized by many, many historians, and that
Well,
it's a collection of anecdotes, and
sure,
there's some methodology. You may take it as condescending, that's okay, but there's a way to write a history book. I don't know what that methodology is. The
right.
ethnic cleansing of Palestine doesn't follow that. So I'm encouraging you to either, and even, and it's going to be, it's too overwhelming for me. I'm not Jewish and I'm not Palestinian either, and I
Sure.
really don't feel like doing it. But I looked with a scholar, and watched those videos from Liam on his
Mhm.
YouTube channel, on his TikTok, and
Right.
it's either misinformation or
Fine.
completely false. And when I was going over his videos with a scholar, that they were shocked that what this guy was saying. And by the way, that scholar is Muslim. So, like, I'm going over this not even with an Israeli from the Middle East, but a
Sure.
Muslim scholar who's very knowledgeable about
Well,
this stuff.
the
So,
fair
I
thing,
would encourage you to,
the fair thing is, first of all, I appreciate your suggestion about having different points of view as a panel. I'll consider that. But I want to get people that aren't going to be monologuing and stepping on people. A lot of the pro-Israel people that I've gone on lives with.
I'm not saying that,
Let
but
me
at
let me let
least,
me let me let me finish, okay? I'm sorry. So the other thing is, here's what I would suggest you do. You've made some allegations that are pretty strong. No, I know you say you're not doing it from a point of condescension. You're just trying to clarify the record. Fair enough. But if you have specific points of refutation, not just in a general sense, which you've given a very general sense. If there are specifics that you want to allude to, I'll certainly entertain those. If you don't want to take the time to do that, understandably so, it takes work. You've already done a lot of work, it sounds like. That's fine too. But it's hard for me to take in general feedback like that without specificity, if that makes sense. So I don't know what your angle is, what you're coming from. You say you're not Jewish, you talk to a Muslim scholar, whatever they may be. I don't have an allegiance, whether you think you say I have a bias. Okay, the bias intimates that somebody has a reason to make determinations because of some predisposition, right? I don't have that with any issue that I analyze. In fact, I normally take positions that are counter to the establishment and what would actually make it easier for me to traverse life, both socially and economically, not because I want to be difficult, but because that's where the evidence points. I tend to side with the underdog. And the underdog in this case happens to be the Palestinian people. I don't like to see people being constantly mistreated and marginalized, terrorized by another state and another army, because I think it is unfair. I think what happened in 1948 was unfair to the people that were displaced. Now, you may disagree. You may say that the establishment of the state was justified and that because the UN sanctioned it and the US and the British were involved, that it's A-OK. And so it was unfortunate that people got displaced. I don't view it that way. Doesn't mean that I'm pro-Palestinian. I'm against displacement, marginalization, occupation, and subjugation and terror. That's it.
So, of in the case of the book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, I'm encouraging you to go look at the criticisms of that book. It doesn't follow historical methodology, and it's a collection of anecdotes, and I have read portions of it myself.
What are the criticisms and by whom?
From legitimate historians. I don't recall off the top of my head.
Can you give me one name of anybody?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I'm saying this for a second time.
But I'm
encouraging you to do your own education.
Listen, I'm not going to do my own anything. You've brought up these allegations. You can at least provide
then don't do it. Do whatever you want.
I'm not going to.
But that book is misleading, and it is highly criticized.
Says you with zero evidence. You're not.
That's not says me. That says his
zero. Listen, if you want to come on and refute something, I'm happy to have you on. But you come on with no evidence. You're making very, very obtuse claims, and you're not willing to provide any sources. You're saying, do your own research to criticize your own opinion. No. If you have a take on this, which means you have a different interpretation on it, I respect your opinion, okay? You have the right to interpret the facts and say that other scholars have criticized something. Give me one. Give me one person, any book, any author, any source. Your Muslim reference, give me that person's name. I'll look into it. But if you come here with generalizations, you tell me that I'm biased, not knowing where I come from or how I see these issues, and then you make general claims that have no supporting evidence, what am I supposed to do with that? I listened to Liam on a 3-hour live discuss Gaza. You're saying he's wrong historically. He has no idea what he's talking about. It's not his area. First of all, he has a specific degree in studying the Israel-Palestine conflict in addition to a world history PhD. And you're saying he doesn't know what he's talking about, okay? Okay, if you want to make those allegations, we have to go down point by point about what he has said that you can refute directly. I listened to him for 3 hours one time. I've not found one thing he said based on my understanding of the situation, which could be flawed. He didn't say one thing that was counter to the things that I've come to learn through painstaking reading and research for 34 years. So what am I supposed to do with what you're saying? It's counter to everything that I've learned, but I'm open. But you have to come with some goods. You can't come with generalities. That's not fair. Anybody can come with that kind of criticism on anything and say, figure it out, do your research. No, it's not my job to figure out the refutations that you're claiming are so strong. Okay? I don't mean to be unpleasant about it, but the fact that you pre-assume that I have a bias because of some reason, you said maybe my ethnicity or my family heritage. You don't know that. I come from a white Anglo-Saxon background from Europe. And I'm a privileged, I went to private school as a kid. I'm sort of a privileged white person. Okay, fair enough. I got that bias, right? But presuming that I have some sort of connection to a Palestinian position because I tend to side with the oppressed, that's inaccurate and assumptive, right? So that kind of bothered me a little bit. I don't know anything about your background. I'm not making assumptions about you. I could say you sound like a Zionist. I could say that. I didn't say that because I was trying to take you for what you're saying. But come with some evidence, please. And again, I'll give you my email address. And I'm happy to entertain it. I'm not disingenuous. I will look at it. If there's evidence that refutes what Liam has said and what I believe, I want to get it right. So please provide the correction, but not a generality. My email address again is chipbarnesonline@gmail.com. And if you have video you want to upload that won't go as an email attachment, if you want to take some of your analysis and say, here's what Liam said that's not correct. Here's what my chat GPT and my Muslim scholar said. Here's the books he's written. Here's why. Send me that. It doesn't have to be very long. Send me 2 paragraphs. Or send a video up to just Chip Barnes, t.me/Chip Barnes. I'll look at it. I'll try to be fair. I always try to be fair. But the way you came across today was, without evidence. So please come back with evidence. I'll bring you on if you have the evidence. But by the way, I do appreciate your suggestion about trying to be balanced. So I'll take you up on that. If you know somebody who you think is a good presenter of a different point of view, because again, there are 2 sides to this, right? People see it differently. It's not about the information being right or wrong. It's about an interpretation of what's actually happened from a different point of view. Okay? So that's how I see it. Again, I'm not trying to be mean to you, but you jumped off. But provide me the evidence. I'll take a look. Okay, enough said. All right, we had a guest that was on. We have 2 guests. We have Shackles and we have Danny. So let's bring up Shackles and we'll bring up Danny. I do have to walk the dog, so I'm going to start doing that. So forgive me if there's some output. I'm going to try to put my earbuds on.
Hi, Chip.
Hello.
I wasn't able to find you. I was looking at I was messaging you on the other account and I was like, are you still going live? But yeah, found you. Are you still?
Yeah, I'm trying to put him on one of my, well, yeah. So what I did was, just to let you know, so can you hear me okay now? I just put on my earbud.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So I have 2 accounts. My primary account is Chip Barnes 67. That has had a lot of issues. This is how many times it's been taken down. So I'm trying to do other work on my backup channel to try to get more people following that. Because right now I have 105,000 followers on the primary and like 4,200 on the backup.
Yeah.
So I'm
Okay.
trying to get more people to come over. So I'm doing half my lives now on my primary and then asking people to come over to the secondary. Some people are, some people won't. So what eventually is going to happen, real quick, and I'll let you get back to your question, is I'm going to be moving people even further onto some different stuff just to have some fault tolerance, if you will. And that way, if
Of
this whole
course.
thing, because by the way, this app may go away. I talked about this earlier. Senator Josh Hawley, if you don't know, he's a Republican from Missouri. He has put into the Defense Authorization Act, he's buried it in there, that will disallow TikTok as an app to be used in the United States.
I see. Yeah, Holly is a bit of a prick. But
No, not a bit. Not a bit. He's a giant prick.
yeah. But yeah, you wanted me to come on, so I'm here. I'm all ready. So shoot me with all the questions, or I don't actually, but give me whatever questions you have, conversation. I'm here for you.
Well, first, let me tell the audience what I do know about you, and then hopefully you can fill in the blanks so people have an idea of where you're coming from. So I was on a live, I think it might have even been Liam's, and this person was on the live speaking with Liam, and I was just really impressed with the style of communication, the succinct language, with the articulate nature of the talk, and the content. I was just impressed. So I said to the person, I messaged them and said, hey, if I can ever have you on a live, I'd love to have you come by. So I don't really have a specific question for you. I'd like you to fill in your bio if you choose to share, but maybe the audience can ask some questions. But you sounded like somebody who's extremely knowledgeable about the Israel-Palestine issue. And did you hear the previous person that called in? And maybe you can talk to that a little bit. If you think that I handled that the wrong way, you can share your thoughts or otherwise. So your bio and then whatever else you want to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following this. I've been a staunch pro-Palestinian person advocate since I want to say 2014 was like my great awakening. I'm on Eric's show a lot as well. Eric kind of
Okay.
considers me a co-host. I'm kind of like his pit bull. When someone comes up and starts speaking nonsense, I have full range to kind of break down their arguments and speak with them. I also speak in a different accent, but I'm not going to do it here. Eric, I don't know why, wants me to speak in a British accent for some reason, but I'm not British, you guys. I'm really, really not British. But no, Chip, I'm so sorry. I actually missed that. I was busy trying to find where you were, so I didn't see your conversation, but you're welcome to fill me in and kind of let me know what was going on
Yeah,
and where
sure.
some of
I'll
the
do it quick.
sticking
I'll do it
points.
quickly as possible. So a guest came on, and he didn't represent himself as one side or the other. He made a quick suggestion that I have a more balanced approach as far as the guests that I bring on, so that we can have more of a back and forth, which I think is actually a good suggestion. And then he also said that he thought that Liam was not a knowledgeable scholar when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict, specifically in Gaza. He claimed that Liam had said multiple things that were incorrect about the conflict, and that he had recorded the back and forth on the live that I have with Liam, and that he had gone through and checked it on Chat GPT, as well as cross-referenced it with a Muslim scholar, and that it came back as all being incorrect. And I told him that my recollection of Liam talking about it, because I'd heard Liam talk on one of his lives for like 3 hours one time, and I thought he didn't say a single word that I didn't think was spot on. And my recollection of what Liam said during our live was that it was same thing. It was congruent with all the things I think I've learned. Now, I said to him, if there are things that I'm getting wrong specifically, I asked him for specifics. He said that there's like multiple authors who have debunked Elian Pape's The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, that it was all based on anecdotes, no facts. So I said, okay, well, what's the name of one of these writers and he couldn't give me any references. I said, well, what's the name of the scholar who you're referring to who debunked it? He couldn't give me the name. I said, well, here's my email address. Here's my Telegram. If you want to send me video or other references, please do, and I'll check them out. He's like, well, I don't know. It's not my job. You should research it. I'm like, I'm not going to go looking around for things to debunk the things that I know. If you have somebody who you think does a good job of it, send it to me. And he just kind of
Yeah.
dropped off. So that's
No,
where things were on that one.
I completely agree with you. I feel like it's so crazy that the other side claims that pro-Palestinians are very, they speak from emotion, that they don't have knowledge. It's this dehumanization of our intellect, which is even what they use to justify pew-pewing Palestinians and now Lebanese. So again, they just want to speak. They're the ones that are speaking from emotions. They're the ones trying to use trigger words to get people to respond in a certain way. In all honesty, I don't have, I've only had a couple of people that I would say speak well and articulate well. But for the majority, it's either a little bit of racism and Islamophobia interwoven into their beliefs, or it is just that they're just bigoted. And I really have a hard time. Um, Seeing and meeting people from the other side that don't have those beliefs when they are discussing Palestinians or discussing anything of Arab culture, of Arab history. Hello.
That's Barney, the orange cat, and Ruby, the coonhound, hound
Those are
dog.
such cute names.
Hound dog. Yeah, she's a beautiful dog. So we're about to take her out for a walk, but we can continue the conversation while we do. So,
Sure.
where are you from? The U.S. or where are you from? Where do you live?
Yes, I am from the US. I right now live in two states. I live with my parents in one state and then I live in another state. But I do
Okay.
want to keep that a bit ambiguous, just for personal reasons. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And so in terms of this advocacy work, have you ever visited the occupied territories or Gaza or East Jerusalem?
No, I personally haven't. No.
And do you know anybody who lives over there?
So many people. I know many people that live there that go back and forth. One of my good friends actually, his family worked on building, actually like constructing and having buildings being made in Nablus. And he
Okay.
would tell and share how difficult it would be to get those permits, that they would have to really fight with the government there, and the Israeli government to be able to get these specific permits of how much of a dragging process it would be, but they would have an upper hand versus other Palestinians because they're considered American. But even despite them being American, they know that you're not truly, truly American. They know that you're actually Palestinian. They know your lineage. They know your history. So they would really drag their feet, make tons of threats that were going to go ahead and break down this infrastructure. And it was just honestly hell, but they wanted and believed that they needed to do this for the Palestinians. And so they kept moving forward. So I recall one of those stories of just constant just beratement and constant harassment of how the structures are getting put in place and being built. And then the amount of times, threats are getting made, like they had to make sure everything was up to Israeli code, because if anything was not accurate or anything was off, it was going to get demolished.
It's such a mess. The permit system, which is really unfair to Palestinians, they won't issue permits for construction. So if you build something in the West Bank, they will come out and warn you that you have to take it down. If you don't take it down, they'll bring a bulldozer or some other piece of demolition equipment. And if they do it for you, they charge you for the demolition. So you have to pay for the Israelis to destroy your home. So a lot of times they'll destroy their own home, which is so sad and so unnecessary. The Israelis are just cruel all the way across, at least those who do these types of things.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
It's really
it's
heartbreaking.
it's really, really heartbreaking. I mean, at that point, then it's like, okay, you don't want them to build. You don't want them to live. You want everything to be according to your standard. So, what are they allowed to do?
Yeah.
Right? And the threshold of what they're allowed to do is so low. It's basically like so dehumanizing at that point. Then you have to truly sit there and say, is that okay? And when you break down that logic and you speak to someone that is pro zombie, they are unable to even like process that. They have to provide, oh well, they can do this and they can do that, and they'll like cherry pick little parts of the sentence without misunderstanding your whole point that you're trying to make.
Yeah, it's a real problem. I mean, all the way around. If you want, the more you learn about the West Bank, I mean, you can watch an easy documentary called "Life in Occupied Palestine." That's a
Yes.
resource that I always try to reiterate because it's a young Jewish woman who didn't believe what her friends were telling her about what happens there, so she went and traveled there to find out for herself. And what she learned was like, it was so eye opening. She came back to talk about it, and it's in that documentary. And she's been an advocate ever since for what she learned, and rightly so, right? Once you learn this story, and this is the problem with the propaganda system and what I call lying by omission. In Israel, they get a story that's ridiculous. It's very narrow, very pro Israel, very pro Zionism. But in America, the news never used to show anything that's happening there, ever, other than pro-Israel. Like they blame the other side for everything. So people are now seeing this stuff with their own two eyes, thank goodness. And that's the biggest game changer we're seeing. How do you feel about that?
No, I completely agree that there's also another documentary called The Getting Israel. Basically, I know Mel, I don't know if you've ever spoken to Mel, but she is a Jewish pro-Palestinian living in America, and she actually was playing this documentary discussing like the deprogramming getting done on people that were very, very pro-Israel, and how they've learned so much and the guilt that they hold now, knowing that they were a part of the system, and how they can kind of help uh, in the future and move forward, which I think is a beautiful thing. But the fact that we've been so blind as a society to this
Yeah.
is truly, truly detrimental, and it's allowed, and I think it's propagated other uh, ethnic cleansings. It's allowed other people to kind of look the other way
Yeah.
uh, for whenever there is a need. I mean, I'm not going to lie, like today, I don't know if you know, Chip, but they went ahead and they attacked Beirut, which is the
Yep.
capital of Lebanon, right?
Yep.
And
I do.
while in my heart truly sank, because in my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like this is about to be a regional war. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to live through another Iraq or Afghanistan ever again. This is
Yeah.
crazy. But the thing is that outrage is not there. The outrage of, oh my God, they're unaliving Arabs. It's like the optics don't work as well for
Yeah.
the pro, I guess, resistance or pro Arab nations, and it's like the optics favor them. So for me, it's almost like, are you guys just attacking Lebanon now because the optics look better than attacking in Gaza and in the West
Yeah.
Bank? So it's these mind games that they play, and they lie so easily. I mean, I have no
Yeah.
doubt that every government lies, but they're so bad at it. They're truly so bad at it that it's laughable. And I'm sometimes like, am I watching an SNL skit because of how bad they are at lying?
Yeah, I say that a lot. There's a couple of videos I've done recently. I don't know if you saw. One was called "Israel Always Lies," and it was something like the fact is. Did you see the interview with that young lady who was first released? She had the problem with her arm, and the H group
Yes.
took good care of her. And then she gave a quick little interview when she was sitting in the Red Cross vehicle when she was first released. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I hope you'll look at it. It's one of my more recent ones. But
She
she
changed
gave an
her
interview saying that people
testimony.
were nice. What's that?
She completely changed her testimony and talked
I
about
was
all
going to
these.
tell people. So she said something like this: "They were very kind to me. They fed me well. Things were good." Something like that. And then when they got her back home in Israel, about a month and a half later, obviously she had been approached by somebody. And my guess is she was also given some sort of remuneration, but that's a guess. But she said something completely different. She said she went through her own personal HOLA, you know, cost savings.
Yeah.
So I think that's ridiculous. And then she said that they were a bunch of women and children involved. They were staying in houses. They were using them, basically using people as human shields, the whole BS like that. So it's just
Yeah.
sad to see somebody who was treated well and treated kindly, who acknowledged it. And then she comes back and just completely changes the story. It was very sad. We do have some other guests that have been waiting really patiently. I wanted to
Sure.
ask you, though, are you willing, if I have a panel of maybe three people that are pro-Pally, three people that aren't, would you be willing to come on for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love that.
Okay. I'll let you know when that comes up. Thank you so
Okay.
much for coming on. Thanks for all the good work you do, and thanks for being as educated as you are. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Happy New Year. Okay. Yeah, great to have a guest who's very articulate and understands it. The other thing I was going to ask her, just to let you know, before I set up that little panel we're talking about, is she said she knew some people that lived in the West Bank or somewhere in the occupied territory. So let's see if we can get one of those folks to come on as well. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, we've had some guests that are waiting very patiently. If I miss your questions, I'm more like watching for any step in the street here, so I apologize. Danny's coming up, and then next is going to be Evangelical or Evangel Waynes. Hey, Danny.
Hey Chip, can you hear me okay?
Hey, I can.
Okay. Yeah, so I was around for the previous call, and it's funny because recently I publicly left high demand religion
Okay.
that I grew up and I was born into it. And there's a lot of similarities and overlap with the concept and the practice of apologetics,
Okay.
where it seems like it's a this defense mechanism of like institutions that do indefensible things. So therefore they kind of have to obfuscate just enough so that the people that might be fence sitters, they just
Mm-hmm.
basically stay on the fence, right? So I think what people have to remember is that those people that don't show up with any evidence, like it's an agenda. It's intentional. It is to obfuscate just enough so that people that might be on the fence stay on the fence.
Yeah, possibly so. I mean, the thing I thought found about his conversation was one, he made an assumption about sort of my background, which I think is kind of silly. You can just ask that question. And then number two, I'm not pro-Palestinian. I'm against oppression. And it just so happens that the parties in this particular situation, the oppressor happens to be Israelis, some of whom are Jewish or many, and they happen to be Zionists that are pushing the agenda the hardest. And that the
Right.
people being subjugated are the Palestinians. So I'm for the people being subjugated, not the particular ethnicity or religion or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm someone that's new to a lot of the information outside of like the propaganda that we've been had because we've been fed because I'm a product of the American school system, and it's been in my adulthood that I'm getting to learn some more, some of the more historical facts. So one book that's been helping me stay in a lot of conversations with people that try to say, the usual talking point has been 100 years of war on Palestine, I think it is.
Okay.
I just started doing the audiobook on that one, and Yeah, many people are just completely unaware, right, that they were a self-governing people
Yeah.
prior to 1948. For a
Yes.
long, long time, they have a very deep history with the place, and yeah, it's just ugly to see because, and sorry to monologue. You can jump in, cut me off whenever you want.
Well,
But I
let me mention
go
one
ahead.
resource, because if you ever get that point, some people say there was no such thing as Palestine because it wasn't a state, or there's no such thing as Palestine, which you hear often. You can very simply rebut with this. I have a copy of it saved in my notes. Golda Meir, who's the only female prime minister of Israel. They did a video. Helen Mirren starred as Golda Meir. It's called Golda. Anyway, it's propaganda bullshit. But she actually said in an interview with a British, TV host, she said, no, no, no. The territory from Israel over to the Jordan River that's Palestine. She goes, I was a Palestinian. I carried a Palestinian passport from 1921 to 1948. I'm a Palestinian. So that
Mm,
interview is great ammunition. Say, yeah, you're the prime minister of the damn country you're defending made, and they had administration. It was like a regular. It wasn't a state, but it
right,
behaved like a bunch of county governments working in conjunction with each other. Is what it kind of was.
right. Well, yeah, and I mean, at that point in history, that's what many places were.
Yeah, exactly. Formal nation states weren't really a thing until modern history. And only recently we've had these statehoods. They're usually territories or people, or like you have in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is an artificial state, obviously. So are much of this, the Sykes-Picot Agreement kind of carved up the Middle East in such a way that it was basically separating and creating chaos among different groups. But everything is tribal and regional.
Yeah,
That's how life became, and then it was formally, put into these artificial boundaries in many cases, and they call it a nation state. It's a human construct. It's kind of silly, actually.
right. No, it's true. I so moving west because I grew up in the Northeast in
Uh huh.
Jersey.
Okay.
So when I first moved west, I ended up in this small town in the middle of Utah, close to the border with Wyoming, and I was running a retail store there. That's the job that took me there. And yeah, it was just insane to hear what some of the local people would say about the nearby reservation. Like
Yeah.
there was, and just not being from that place, right? Just hearing people talk about like, oh well, we gave them this and we allow them to do this, and
Yes,
like in my
exactly.
head, I'm just like, it's their land. What do you mean you allow them? You give them? Like, are you kidding me? And
Yeah.
that's like now that I know the history of my previous religion, Mormonism, and you see like some of the like the genocide that religion um committed on native people of the the Utah territory before it
Yeah.
became a state. It's just horrible. So again, just as someone that has to sift through the minutia of apologetics and actual history,
Yeah.
a lot of the tactics that previous caller, because I was there for the whole thing,
Okay.
are just like carbon copies of each other.
Interesting. And I don't mean anybody, ill will. It's like, if there's evidence that does support contradictions to what I've been talking about or that others have brought up
Yeah.
during my lives, I certainly am open to listening to them, because I really want to
So
get it right, whatever it
what
may
I
be.
what
But
I can say is that one thing, and I don't remember the exact media. It might have been the Anthony Bourdain episode, Jerusalem.
okay.
There's on the Israeli side, there's a restaurant owner that is, at least at the time of the taping of that episode, he just seemed to, be for peace. And his daughter died, from an attack that wasn't
Oh,
prevented by the Iron Dome. From what I saw, the most recent media prior to the conflict, they said that it was less than 50 people, 50 Israelis that had died from the Hamas attacks when they fired rockets into
no,
Israel.
no, you know what the number is? It's
It
six.
was,
It's
what was it?
six. Six people have died with all the rockets that have ever been sent across. People have been injured, but
Okay, okay.
only
So
six
I
human
might be
beings have ever
conflating
died.
the injuries with the deaths. Okay, but yeah, it's it's the UN talks about proportionality, and
Yeah.
there's just no metric, and that's the thing when when you don't have the facts on your side, you kind of have to just make a plea to like someone with more authority on the side, like so then you kind of hide behind those expertise, but again, when pressed for information, there's always this constant retreat. So it's
Yeah.
uh, yeah, you're gonna see it a lot. When people are trying to defend the indefensible.
No, great points. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. And thanks for giving us your insights on that call. That's really helpful to me. So have a great day and Happy New Year to you.
Same. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Yeah, great points, huh? Yeah, it's really shocking. I thought with all those bombs, all those rockets, right? Remember, those rockets that the H group sends are very crude, they're unguided, and they're very unsophisticated. They don't really have a huge explosive payload. So remember that hospital, the Al Shifa hospital was bombed, or maybe it was the Christian hospital. I don't remember which one it was, but there was a big conjecture as to who did it. They were talking about it being a failed H group rocket. The impact that came down on that hospital was nowhere near the impact level. It was much greater than the impact level of an H group rocket, which has a very small payload. I've actually seen one on video explode when it hits. It's very minor. But this thing was a kaboom. It was more like a JDAM, which is a rocket system from the US. It's a guided bomb that gets basically propelled down to the target at a very fast rate, and it has a huge explosive signature. So yeah, only 6 people. Pretty crazy, huh? You hear about all the fear of all these things, that we live in fear. Listen, you wouldn't live in fear if you gave your neighbor a legitimate place to live with freedom and autonomy that was with dignity and was based on a reasonable set of borders and don't control every bit of their lives. That's all you got to do. Then they'll just live their lives and they'll leave you the fuck alone. Okay. We have one more guest on here. It's Evangeline Waynes 25. And this is going to be the last guest. We're going to be shutting down after this. Are you there? Are you there? Okay, she's not coming through, so let me just push her off of there for a sec. Maybe you'll come back in. Angeline, I couldn't get you to come through, so if you want to try to reconnect, a lot of times if you shut down your TikTok app and come back into the live, it'll clear that up. What Bluetooth am I using? My Bluetooth, these are the Apple AirPod Pros, and I don't like to buy a lot of stuff, but these are, I tell you what, as far as something being of value, I got to tell you, these things have been super helpful. Now, are they healthy? I don't know. Hey, Tim. Good. As far as them being healthy, this is one of my neighbors who's always walking his dog. Want to play? It's always fun. I get so much use out of these things. They're so convenient, and they function very well. I'm not a spokesperson for Apple. I certainly don't get paid by them, but they make pretty good products for the most part. And I've had other Bluetooth head earbuds, and I just thank you, Tim. And these are just ridiculously. Sorry, my dog almost knocked me over. They just work really well, and I've been very pleased. They even have a feature, if you lose one, you can find it. It makes a loud noise, so if you drop it on the ground or whatever, so I like that. Anyway, the ones they first made, the original generation, were really long. They were much longer, and they look kind of weird. They look like you have a pencil coming out of your ear, but these are much better. I'm headed back inside, by the way. Does anybody have any other questions? If I missed your questions, I'm sorry. I was listening to that last guest, and I probably wasn't watching all your questions as well as I could have been. May I know what Zionism means, or Zionist? Okay, I'll go through that really quickly. So, for those of you who don't know what Zionism is a movement. It's a concept of a state. It's a political movement. It's a political land-based movement where people who were marginalized historically wanted a place for a Jewish homeland. So it wasn't in Palestine. It was initially looked at for 3 different locations. One of which was historic Palestine, but the others, quite interestingly, one was in Africa, in modern day Uganda, and the other one was in Argentina, in South America. But it was decided upon, and the founder of Zionism was a European Ashkenazi Jewish man named Theodor Herzl. Then the other person that took over, he died. This is 1897 when the documents were originally drafted for the concept of Zionism. Again, it's a political movement. He was an atheist. He did not practice Judaism. So whenever people tell you it's a Jewish movement as far as religion, that's not true. Then he died in 1904. Who took over was a guy named Chaim Weizmann. Chaim Weizmann was a very smart guy. So what Chaim Weizmann did was he understood that the British, after World War II, which ended in 1919, had a mandate for Palestine. They divvied up all the different mandates between the French and the British because the Germans are the ones who lost the war. So after World War One ended, maybe it didn't end in 1919, it may have ended in 1920, but whatever. So the goal of the Zionist movement was to lobby the British and to get the Americans on board, and eventually what became the United Nations, to approve a mandate for a Jewish state in historic Palestine. So from 1921 until 1948, different groups formed that were pro-Zionist, among which was David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, who worked with a group called the Irgun. And what they did is they worked towards creating a framework for a Jewish state to be carved out. But in addition, they were very anti-indigenous residents. So there was all sorts of incidents that took place where there were massacres, where people in different villages were basically snuffed out. And there's whole history. You can type in pogroms or massacres in historic Palestine. There's somebody just made a great video about it too. So she's like, hey, what happened on the 7th sucks, but let me tell you what else sucks. And she went through the whole list of all, Deir Yassin and other places like that. So it's a political settler colonial ideology that masks itself in Judaism and Jewish, self-autonomy and self-determination. So a lot of people aren't critical of Jewish people per se, because if you don't know much about the makeup of the territory, in historic Palestine, there were Arab Muslims, predominantly some Arab Christians, and a lot of Jewish people who practiced Judaism. They lived in relative harmony for most of the time they were there. Skirmishes here and there, like normal stuff, but they administered their own territory. That everyone had good lives. They traded with each other. And it was this disruption of the Zionist movement that caused all the consternation. And when it finally formed in 1948, the writing was already on the wall. But when it was done, there was then forcible displacements, like literally brigades of people that went out to remove people from their land, just like what's happening in the West Bank right now, but on a more greater scale and much faster. So with that all said, that's the Zionist movement. And the largest proponents of Zionism are the hard right on the Israeli political scheme. There are some people that are more moderate, secular Jewish people that aren't as pro-Zionist. Many want security, and they want people to have a safe place to be, both of which I think are laudable goals. The question is where and what impact, right? So that's the question. That's the original sin, so to speak, that keeps getting ignored. Most Americans don't know about the Nakba, which is what the term is used to describe the catastrophe of these different incursions that led up to and also included after the state of Israel, which forcibly unalived or moved off the land a large group of were basically indigenous Arab Muslims and some Christians. Now, it was also disruptive to some Jewish people who lived outside the border of Israel. They had to get displaced the other way. But it was many more, about 700 to 750,000, mostly Arab Muslims that were forcibly displaced, many of which were unalived. About 14 or 15,000 people were unalived during the Nakbas and the different, incursions we talked about. But that has since been exceeded by what's happening now in Gaza, of course, by a bunch. So it's referred to, and some Israelis were calling for a second Nakba, which is pretty disgusting. There's a great book called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, which covers the history of all this. Of course, the last 2 callers ago or 3 callers ago, or guests, he was saying that book has been debunked by several scholars. So I wasn't aware of that. Take that for what it's worth. Maybe it's true. I don't know. By the way, I'm not some bastion of knowledge on this. I've just read books. Like, I'm just consolidating what I've read and sharing it back with you all. I didn't know any of this stuff. So that's what's going on with that. Let me see if I can have our guests in here. No more guests. Any other questions we have before I shut down? I normally go, just to let you know my schedule, I normally go live Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I go live from 12 noon until about 2 p.m. Today, we're running a little over. So I enjoy this. I'm fun. My name's Chip Barnes. I'm an Army vet, someone who learned about this in 1989 and have been following it for 34 years. And it's not gotten better. It's only gotten worse as the decades have gone on. The only good thing that's happening is that this action that was taken, this act of resistance that was taken against blockade and oppression and occupation by the H group, did it have some things happen within it that were not okay? Yeah, to some extent. We don't know exactly how many people were unalived, by whom, and in what manner. A lot of stories coming out, a lot of 40 babies atrocity propaganda. So we don't know exactly. A lot of Israeli military involvement. So we'll never probably know the exact number, but there are some that happen, which is not good. But it's a tactic used to disrupt the occupying force. It happened during the colonies of the United States when the quote unquote patriots fought back. Same kind of tactics, as gross as they are. So as far as what's next and what's going to happen, I don't know exactly what's going to happen next. People ask me that all the time. But the only thing we can hope for is that the American government puts enough pressure, or the Israeli people from within, they're mad about the hostages. That was the main reason behind the effort. They wanted to go get hostages to bring back to Gaza, to then use them as leverage to get many of their citizens out of Israeli jails and prisons. Because if you don't know this, the Israelis routinely raid the West Bank and they forcibly take people back to jail. Or they'll take a kid who threw a stone at an armored vehicle. They'll charge him with terrorism, take him to a military court. There's a 99.7% conviction rate. They stick him in a jail permanently, 20 years, for throwing a rock. So they're basically hostages, right? So at the time of the event, there was about 7,000 Palestinians that were being held in brutal conditions. If you haven't watched my videos, go back like 5 or 6 videos. By the way, in my video library, I have a lot of information you can go back and check out. And also in the ones that I've reposted from others. So if you go to my main page, you can look through my videos, which I think are helpful. But there's also a lot of other good ones that I've reposted that I think are also really good. So I hope you'll check that out. So you know my schedule. There's a pinned message. So if you forget it, just come to the very first picture on my page is my schedule. So, and if that changes, just to let you all know, because of just practical considerations, most people like me start to migrate some of their activity to places where they can either speak more freely and or have a following where you can cover your expenses, or some combination of the two, which I'm getting ready to start doing. The reason why I'm on this account today, just so you know, if you're wondering, like, why is Chip on this? My main account is Chip Barnes 67. This is my backup account, which is Truth Seeker 670. And I'm doing half of my lives now on my primary account, and then in the second half on the backup account to get more followers here. Because I've had the lights turned out 4 times on my primary, if you know what I mean. And 5 times I've been in the middle of live broadcast and it's been taken off. So because of those things, I call them shenanigans. You just want to have a second place to be with people, right? So that's why I'm doing that. And eventually, if you go to my Linktree, which is in my bio, it's just a little thing that says Linktree Chip Barnes. For those of you who don't know, Linktree is like a shortcut to to somebody's list of things they do elsewhere. So that's where you can see my backup account. You can see my Facebook. I'm sorry, not Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. On my Twitter feed, I have a list of all the people who I've followed over the years who I think are objective, kind of have the same style as I do. And they're just good people that aren't bought off. So if you want to check them out, please do. There's about 35 or 40 names that I think are good people. So, and then finally, if you do want to support me, I'm not going to bang on that drum too hard, but if you want to help out, in my bio towards the bottom, there's like 4 or 5 ways you can do it. There's ways you can do it in TikTok. There's like a gold star on the screen somewhere, but TikTok keeps 70% of whatever you donate for them, which I'm glad their business makes money. Good for them, but that's obviously not as beneficial to a content creator. So I love TikTok. I wish them no ill will. Just that arrangement obviously is a little bit, top heavy. So if you want to help out, you can go there. This seems like the Cash App, Venmo, Zelle, I think it's Patreon and PayPal. So anything you donate is great. Even if you donate $1 a month, because my goal is to have a big following that gives a little bit for good media. And then of course I can survive and keep doing more of it. That's the goal. Just to let you know, from a transparency standpoint, I'm setting up my website. My monthly expenses are $2,600, which is pretty lean for somebody. I live a lean life. I'm going to put out all the donations I get, and I'm going to put out my expenses so everyone can see where the money's going. There's no shenanigans there. And there are some people, by the way, you have to be careful, even big influencers who don't do that. They bring in money from donations. They say they're doing cause A, B, or C. Some are honest, but some aren't, or some combination in between. So a lot of allegations against Fiona Ryan and a lot of allegations against, believe it or not, Sean King, that have sort of dogged him and followed him from his days in BLM. So I don't know for sure. I don't want someone to ever say that about me. So I'm always going to be honest and straightforward. And hey, listen, I may fail, right? I may not make my ends meet and I got to go get a job somewhere. And if that's what it is, so be it. But I'll do what I can to try to keep this happening. So thank you for being here, everybody. I really appreciate it. I hope you will go to my link in bio, like Quinn will say, please follow me elsewhere. Please follow me elsewhere because I have to build a duplication of my audience or else I lose you all. So really appreciate your help. And by the way, if you ever have questions, if I missed your questions, I apologize. We have Melissa here, who's a CPA. Melissa, I'm just finishing up for today. I appreciate you being here. But what I will tell you is my next live is going to be tomorrow night at 8 p.m. You have my word if you can come up at that time or maybe Thursday. Come on up and I'll put you first in line because I wasn't able to get you today. And if I missed any of your questions and you're really curious for me to cover something, send me an email. My email address is chipbarnesonline@gmail.com. Pretty simple. My website is going to be, when it comes up, it's coming up soon, is chipbarnesonline.com. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, so everybody, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. I'll see you the next time we talk. Have a great day and Happy New Year to every one of you. Thanks again.